Chapter 26:11. Not to mention snatching the Tianluo grass from them. It was fine if he didn't show up. Wouldn't it be easier to kill him after they obtained the Tianluo grass? In short, they couldn't let him leave this abandoned continent no matter what. While Chu Yuqing and the others were overjoyed, Zhan Beiyue and the others had already sensed the heart of the continent's trembling. Young master, the heart of the continent's energy tide is erupting. The heart of the continent has opened. The group of people were conserving their energy. Hearing this, Zhan Beiyue's tightly shut eyes opened immediately. Get ready. Once the energy tide is over, we'll head to the heart of the continent immediately. He didn't care about the Tianluo grass. Geniuses like Zhan Beiyue had already gotten the chance to consume the Tianluo grass. After all, although it was rare, it wasn't so rare that it was hard to find. As a powerful family in the 3-star Great Heaven domain, it wasn't difficult for the Zhan family to obtain a few Tianluo grass. However, the opportunity to obtain the primordial divine item was hard to come by. The Zhan family had only gotten a few words by chance. They guessed that the primordial divine item might exist on this abandoned continent, but they couldn't be completely sure. In order not to alert the enemy, they had sent the most elite geniuses of the family. Otherwise, given the Zhan family's strength, they could easily flatten the entire flying star field. Why would they only send a few people? It was just a cover-up. Zhan Beiyue and the others had been guarding this abandoned continent for more than half a year. Now that the heart of the continent had opened, they couldn't miss it. When Zhan Beiyue gave the order, the people of the demonic moon sect had also sensed the trembling of the heart of the continent. They were instantly overjoyed. Hee, the heart of the continent has opened. I wonder if the primordial divine item's existence is real. Their gazes were drooling as they looked at the place where the energy tide had erupted. Their greed was unspeakable. However, when they thought of Yu Mingxuan's unfathomable methods, their expressions froze. Given Yu Mingxian's methods, if he wanted this ancient divine object, they wouldn't even have a share in it. During this time, everyone had fully experienced Yu Mingxuan's methods. The elixirs he had given them and the inscription patterns he had drawn on their bodies were extremely useful. Everyone's strength had completely recovered. Not only that, because of the existence of the inscription patterns, their strength had increased by quite a bit. The same amount of strength had increased by many times through the inscription patterns on their bodies. Feeling that they were displaying strength that was completely beyond their own, everyone felt an indescribable excitement in their hearts. At the same time, they feared Yu Mingxian. However, they were extremely unwilling to give up on the primordial divine object just like that. Boss, do you think that after we capture that young man, we can use him to threaten that person and force him to give up that ancient divine object? Will he be willing to do so? A demonic moon sect member said to the leader beside him. The latter's face turned grave for a moment, but soon, he began to laugh coldly. Chapter 26:12. The leader of the evil moon sect was very pleased with himself as he said this. If the news about the ancient divine object was fake, then they would obediently work for Yu Mingquan and capture that young man and hand him over to him. However, if the ancient divine object was real, then they would use that young man's life to threaten the other party. Since the other party had gone through so much trouble just to capture that young man, they would definitely not let him die so easily. Since that was the case, they had room to maneuver. If the other party wanted to use them, then they had to be prepared to be bitten in the back. After all, these people were untrustworthy and unscrupulous people from the evil path. The sneer on the evil moon sect leader's face became even more obvious as he thought about this. On the other side, Yu Mingquan smirked as he shattered the spirit mirror in his hand. A bunch of reckless people. He did not care about these people from the evil moon sect, but the ancient divine object in the heart of the continent. He looked at the energy tide in front of him, which seemed unusually tyrannical and full of vitality. He wanted that ancient divine object, and he also wanted Luo Qingtong. The energy storm in the heart of the continent raged for a full 7 days. During these 7 days, all the decaying spirit energy in the entire abandoned continent had been cleansed. The air was filled with spirit energy that was full of vitality. This was the power of the great path contained in the heart of the continent. Every year, the heart of the continent opened, and the remaining spirit flowers and spirit herbs absorbed this energy tide. By absorbing this energy, they could continue to maintain their vitality and strength in this abandoned continent. The magical beasts and demonic plants that had mutated and could only rely on the decaying spiritual energy to survive also appeared on the ground at this moment, absorbing the rare vitality and energy hungrily. Although they could only rely on the decaying spirit energy to survive, This rare vitality and power was the source of their strength. If they wanted to break through their own boundary barriers, the decaying spirit energy would not be able to do so. Only this energy which contained the power of the Great Path could do so. Therefore, during these 7 days, the sounds of countless demonic beasts and monster plants leveling up could be heard incessantly. There were also sharp and resounding roars from the demonic beasts and monster plants. During these 7 days, Luo Qingtong and the others all left their original campsite and went underground to avoid the demonic beasts and monster plants that rushed up to the surface. Luo Qingtong and the others would be crazy to go against all the demonic beasts and monster plants on the abandoned continent. It would be a small matter if they were attacked by all the demonic beasts and monster plants on the continent. It would be a tragedy if they missed the opportunity to enter the heart of the continent in 7 days. However, as Luo Qingtong looked at the raging energy storm, she felt that this scene was familiar. She thought about this for a long time. Then, she suddenly remembered that in the True Spill continent, when the southern domain had been ravaged by energy storms, it had also been like this. But it was far from being as vast as this. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, her heart skipped a beat. An idea popped up in her mind. However, when she carefully searched for it, she couldn't find it for a while. Her brows were tightly knitted as she kept thinking about this matter. Chapter 26:13. Boom. Outside, the raging tide of energy came to an abrupt end. All the demonic beasts and plants disappeared in an instant. They had absorbed enough vitality and power, so they were all hiding and continuing to refine and break through. Luo Qingtong and the others immediately took action. Let's go to the heart of the continent. Chu Xiaofeng's voice was very excited. The fight for the Tianluo grass this time was the highlight of their trip to the abandoned continent. Now that the dust had settled, it was time for these people to return to their families. Chu Xiaofeng had relied on Luo Qingtong to obtain a large number of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Even during the time they were temporarily stationed here, he had relied on Luo Qingtong's guidance to find a lot of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs nearby. He had also cooperated with Gui Feng and the others to kill a lot of demonic beasts and plants. His own strength had been greatly tempered. Under such circumstances, he had achieved all his goals in coming to the abandoned continent. It didn't matter whether he had the Tianluo grass or not. In any case, he had no chance among the top disciples. Even so, he had to go and take a look. After all, it was an important day for the disciples of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Flying Star Lien family to compete. It would be a pity if he didn't go and take a look. However, he didn't know that 2 people in his team were going for the Tianluo grass. In fact, they were aiming for something in the heart of the continent. Brother, let's go. Luo Qingtong didn't care about her previous entanglement with Yi Qianxian. Anyway, this was an urgent matter, and this man wouldn't ask her about trivial matters like sleeping. Yes, that was what Luo Qingtong thought. Otherwise, she would still be in the team of the Red Flame mercenaries. During these 7 days, Luo Qingtong and Ouyang Yingyu were inseparable. At the same time, she finally understood why no one dared to approach Ouyang Yingyu at night. Damn it, he's got 2 personalities. At night, Ouyang Yingyu would become another person. The originally seductive and coquettish woman would turn into a noble and cold woman after dark. She didn't like to talk and would attack anyone who came within 3 feet of her. Even Ouyang Yingyu's weapon was custom-made. During the day, the passionate and coquettish woman wielded a long sword. At night, the long sword would be split into 2, turning into 2 short blades. When Luo Qingtong approached Ouyang Yingyu on the first night, she was almost stabbed in the heart by the 2 daggers. If it weren't for her blood pupil's quick reaction and stopping Ouyang Yingyu's attack at the same time, she would have bled at that moment. After dark, Ouyang Yingyu was a natural assassin, as if she lived for the night. Luo Qingtong and Ouyang Yingyu exchanged moves for a whole night. Every time, Ouyang Yingyu only blocked and did not attack. Chapter 26:14. After all, no one wanted to be hunted down with 2 daggers in the middle of the night, right? Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. As for Yi Qianren, he didn't say anything as he watched her walk towards him. The heart of the continent had been opened. Even if Luo Qingtong didn't walk up to him and leave with him, he would still capture her and imprison her by his side regardless of whether she was willing or not. After all, Luo Qingtong's safety was more important than anything else. Wasn't the reason why he cared about Luo Xiaoqi very simple? He had accepted Luo Qingtong's protection fee during this period of time. Wasn't it his duty to take care of her for those spirit herbs and flowers? Yi Qianxian should really be glad that Luo Qingtong had come up with all sorts of excuses to get close to him. Now that he was taking care of this woman, it wasn't abrupt at all. Yes, come here. Yi Qianxian raised his hand and pulled Luo Qingtong to his side. He resisted the urge to pull her into his arms and protect her. With a wave of his sleeve, Yi Qianxian flew up and headed for the heart of the continent with Chu Xiaofeng and the others. And on the abandoned continent, there were many figures like them who directly rushed over. The members of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan who had entered the abandoned continent to train and kill the devil beasts and demonic plants, as well as plucking spirit flowers and spirit herbs, all flew into the air and charged towards the heart of the continent with their guards. Especially the top disciples. This time the highlight of the show was them. Of course, they didn't rule out the possibility of others picking up scraps in the chaos. Therefore, the other disciples all rushed to the heart of the continent as well. After the battle for the Tianluo grass came to an end, the competition between the two clans had come to an end. Whoosh, whoosh. When Luo Qingtong's group arrived at the heart of the continent, there were already some teams waiting there. The two teams were clearly separated, and they stood at the entrance to the heart of the continent, where the surging mist and lingering spiritual qi had yet to dissipate. They stood on guard against each other. They are from the Lien family of the Flying Star sector. Luo Qingtong looked at the people in front of her who were wearing the Chu clan's uniform. She saw that they were all wearing the same uniform with the word Lien embroidered on their chest. This was the first time that Luo Qingtong had met a member of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan since she came to the abandoned continent. The Flying Star Lien clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan had entered the abandoned continent from the same place. However, the locations where they landed were all different. From the looks of it, the two clans must have discussed this from the very beginning. During the first few days of training, the disciples of the two clans would not interfere with each other. They would fight again when it was time to fight for the Tianluo grass. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so coincidental that Luo Qingtong's group had run into members of the Chu clan after entering the abandoned continent. The two clans must have divided their activity areas so that it would be difficult for them to run into each other from the very beginning. When Luo Qingtong looked at the members of the Flying Star Lien clan, the deadlocked crowd heard the whoosh and looked over at Luo Qingtong's group. Chu Xiaofeng. For top disciples like them, if it weren't for the fact that they needed to fight against the Flying Star Lien clan, he wouldn't even look at Chu Xiaofeng and the others, let alone speak to them. However, the Flying Star Lien clan's people took another look at Chu Xiaofeng and the others. Or rather, they were looking at Luo Qingtong. Chu Qiankong and the others didn't notice, but they could see that Chu Xiaofeng and the others were a little strange. The people of the Red Flame Mercenary Corps and the others were protecting Chu Xiaofeng, but Beiqing, Fengyu and the others were protecting Luo Qingtong tightly. Not only that, even Chu Xiaofeng's subconscious actions just now seemed to be treating Luo Qingtong as the backbone of the group. Chapter 26:16. He didn't know if it was just his imagination, but he felt that this group of white-masked men wasn't simple. This man wore a silver robe with fragmentary gold stars. It was the standard uniform of the Flying Star Lien family's top disciples. Not only that, but he was also surrounded by a group of top disciples. It was obvious that he was their leader. While this man's gaze was on Luo Qingtong and the others on the other side, the sound of rushing wind could be heard. Chu Yuqing and the others had arrived. Bastard, it's you. Chu Yuqing and the other top disciples arrived. When he saw Luo Qingtong and Chu Xiaofeng's group, his eyes instantly turned red. With a whoosh, he launched an attack at Luo Qingtong. However, before his attack could reach Luo Qingtong, Beiqing, Fengyu and the others blocked it. Seeing his attack disappear in midair, Chu Yuqing was furious. He prepared to continue attacking Luo Qingtong. At the same time, he ordered the guards behind him to attack Luo Qingtong as well. At that moment, Chu Xiaofeng stepped in front of Luo Qingtong. Chu Yuqing, what are you doing? Chu Xiaofeng glared at Chu Yuqing. He glanced at Chu Tianming, Chu Ke, and the others behind him. Thinking that Chu Yuqing wanted to avenge Chu Ke and the others, he immediately shouted, Luo Xiaoqi is my guard. Chu Yuqing, even if you want to avenge Chu Ke and the others, you should look at the situation first. Our 8th Elder's faction won't let others bully us without retaliating. Chu Xiaofeng's voice rang out. Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong immediately frowned and turned to look in his direction. What's going on? Chu Qiankong's expression was displeased. The Flying Star Lien family was watching, but his own family was having an internal conflict. They couldn't afford to lose face like that. It's Chu Yuqing. He wants to attack my mercenaries. It seems that the 3rd Elder's faction doesn't like our 8th Elder's faction. That's why their top disciples want to personally take action and vent their anger on my subordinates. Chu Xiaofeng was the first to answer. He was striking first to gain the initiative. He directly elevated Chu Yuqing's matter to the grudge between the 8th Elder and 3rd Elder's factions. In any case, everyone knew of his conflict with Chu Ke. Not only that, but when they were outside the 8th Elder's faction and the 3rd Elder's faction's faction, what was he afraid of? Luo Qingtong had helped him so much along the way, so it was only right for him to help her. Chu Xiaofeng's Chu Yuqing was furious. Chu tesestestestitstttts. Otherwise, don't blame me for making you beg for death in the future. STSS, but at a time like this, he absolutely couldn't reveal that he tried to kill Chu Lingfeng in front of everyone. He also couldn't use this as a reason to attack Luo Qingtong. But he wouldn't let Luo Qingtong off so easily. Chapter 26:17. Beside Luo Qingtong, Yi Chenxian narrowed his eyes at Chu Yuqing's words. He coldly glanced at Chu Yuqing, the light in his eyes exceptionally frigid. Make his woman suffer a fate worse than death? This Chu Yuqing really dared to say such things. He was going to wait here and see how he was going to make his woman suffer a fate worse than death. Yi Chenxian's gaze was icy. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others looked at Chu Yuqing as if they were looking at a dead man. When Chu Xiaofeng heard Chu Yuqing's words, he too was enraged. Listen carefully, the two of you. It's someone from the 3rd Elder's faction who insists on making trouble for the 8th Elder's faction. He spoke with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. When Chu Qiankong and the others heard this, they immediately frowned and looked at Chu Yuqing. They said in a low voice, Chu Yuqing is just a mercenary. Why do you have to make things so ugly here? As he spoke, he glanced discreetly at the Lian family. His meaning was clear. He wanted Chu Yuqing to consider the bigger picture. But Luo Qingtong had ruined Chu Yuqing's plans. How could he let her off so easily? Besides, he needed her to find out Chu Lingfeng's whereabouts. Only then would he be able to find Chu Lingfeng as quickly as possible after the fight for the Skynet grass and kill him. That way he wouldn't be able to tell the family elders that he'd ambushed and killed him. Thus, he completely ignored Chu Qiankong's hints. You said it yourself. She's just a mercenary. So I don't have the right to punish her? Chu Yuqing sneered, his expression overbearing. You don't need to persuade me. Unless she comes out of her own accord and surrenders herself, don't blame me for taking action. If you have the time to persuade me, why don't you tell Chu Xiaofeng to get lost? Otherwise, if I hurt him and make a fool of myself, I won't care. Chu Yuqing's voice was icy. It could be seen that he was determined to make a move against Luo Qingtong. He did not even give face to Chu Qiankong and the others. Both sides were top-notch disciples. If a fight broke out, the situation would be even uglier. As Chu Qiankong and the others thought of this, they immediately frowned. They looked at Chu Yuqing, then turned to Chu Xiaofeng and said, Have your people leave. Their intentions were very clear. They wanted Chu Xiaofeng to ignore Luo Qingtong and let her go out to help Chu Yuqing vent his anger. After all, he was just a mercenary. There was no need for him to cause internal strife in the Tianfeng Chu clan and become a joke to others. Chu Xiaofeng's expression instantly sank when he heard what Chu Qiankong and the others said. This is impossible, he said in a deep voice. Have Luo Qingtong go out and help Chu Yuqing vent his anger? He could not do such a cowardly thing. Moreover, the reason why Luo Qingtong had offended Chu Ke was also because of him. How could he not care about Luo Qingtong? As Chu Xiaofeng thought of this, he immediately said coldly to Chu Qiankong and the others, It's clearly 3rd Elder's people who are causing trouble for 8th Elder's people, yet you want me to hand over my people. If I do as you say, how can 8th Elder's people raise their heads in the Tianfeng Chu clan in the future? You don't need to say anything else, Chu Xiaofeng said in a deep voice. Chu Xiaofeng said in a deep voice, Since you two can't uphold justice for our 8th Elder's people, then I won't force you. But you want me to hand over my people? Absolutely impossible. Chapter 26:18. Chu Xiaofeng, you don't know what's good for you. Your people offended a top disciple. We're helping you by asking you to hand her over. Since you're so ungrateful, then you'll be in trouble with her. Get out of the way. Chu Qiankong's voice was icy cold. These top disciples didn't care about the disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan in the first place. If it had been one of the top disciples of the 8th Elder who spoke, they might have interfered with Chu Yuqing to prevent the situation from becoming too ugly. But who did Chu Xiaofeng think he was? It was already good enough that they were willing to let him hand over Luo Xiaoqi. Since he didn't want to, then he'd be in trouble with Luo Xiaoqi. She dared to oppose a top disciple. If it weren't for the fact that they were on the abandoned continent and the Lian family didn't want to make a fool of themselves, they would have dealt with Luo Qingtong themselves. Chu Yuqing didn't even need to do anything. Who asked her, as the lowest mercenary, to dare to go against a top disciple? The dignity of a top disciple wasn't to be blasphemed. Chu Chengkong's words immediately caused the disciples of the first elders and second elders factions to all take a step back, allowing Chu Xiaofeng and the others to face Chu Yuqing and the others on their own. But unexpectedly, the mercenaries behind those disciples didn't retreat. They glanced hesitantly at Luo Qingtong and Chu Chengkong's group, then gritted their teeth and stood behind Luo Qingtong. My apologies, young masters. Luo Xiaoqi has done us a great favor. We're definitely on her side this time. It wasn't that the mercenaries didn't fear the Tianfeng Chu clan, but Luo Qingtong had helped them a lot. Besides, wasn't Chu Xiaofeng in Luo Qingtong's group? They weren't completely opposed to the Tianfeng Chu clan. If they didn't stand up now, they were afraid they'd never be able to live with themselves. The group of mercenaries all lived by licking blood from the edge of the blade. In this life, there was nothing that could be ignored except for friendship. In this abandoned continent, they had received great kindness from Luo Qingtong and obtained a lot of information about this abandoned continent. Not to mention, Luo Qingtong had provided them with some plans and methods to complete missions in Mercenary City, which had greatly reduced their casualties. If Luo Qingtong only offended the Tianfeng Chu family, they might not stand up for their own interests. But now, Chu Yuqing clearly wasn't going to let Luo Qingtong off. Under such circumstances, everyone had to stand up and support her no matter what. A group of people stood behind Luo Qingtong. Chu Xiaofeng and the other children of the Chu family were somewhat stunned. The members of the Red Flame Mercenary Corps and the other mercenaries behind him took a step forward and patted the mercenaries on their shoulders. Aha, I knew you would stand out. That's right. Young Master Xiaoqi has done us a great favor. How can we not stand out? Those mercenaries who came from the Great Elders and Second Elders branches snorted coldly. Do you think you're the only ones who know how to repay kindness? The mercenaries cast sidelong glances at Gu Yifeng and the others. These guys didn't retreat either, right? Chapter 26:19. What a joke. They weren't any less hot-blooded than these people. They couldn't possibly allow others to point at them and call them cowards in the future. The atmosphere was joyous and harmonious. When Chu Yuqing saw this scene, he was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. What made him even angrier was that most of the mercenaries behind the Tianfeng Chu clan disciples had also walked behind Luo Qingtong. These mercenaries had signed an agreement with the Tianfeng Chu clan until the fight for the Tianluo grass began. Now that the heart of the continent had been opened, they no longer needed to listen to the orders of the Tianfeng Chu clan disciples. Thus, when they saw that Chu Yuqing was making things difficult for Luo Qingtong and wasn't willing to give up, they immediately walked out. The law couldn't punish the majority, so the mercenaries all gathered together. They weren't afraid that the Tianfeng Chu clan people would settle accounts with them after the autumn. The Tianfeng Chu clan people wouldn't purge Tianfeng Mercenary City, right? Even if the Tianfeng Chu clan people could do it, they wouldn't do it just because of Chu Yuqing's grudges and methods. Besides, they still had Chu Xiaofeng on their side. This wasn't just a grudge between them and the Tianfeng Chu clan. It was a grudge between the 8th elder and the 3rd elder. Because of this, the mercenaries didn't hesitate in the slightest as they walked out. Except for those who were not on good terms with Luo Qingtong, those from the Black Iron Mercenary Group and those mercenary groups that were on good terms with them, the others all walked behind Luo Qingtong. In an instant, a large wave of people and power had gathered behind Luo Qingtong. This power wasn't inferior to the power behind Chu Yuqing and the others. It was just that Chu Yuqing and the others were top-notch disciples, so the ranks of their guards were much higher than the mercenaries. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong would have been able to overwhelm them with just the number of people and power she had gathered. Bastard. Chu Yuqing's expression was extremely gloomy. He'd originally wanted to force Luo Qingtong to turn her back on her friends and family. Without Chu Xiaofeng and the others to help her, it would be easy for him to deal with the other party. Who would have thought that such a small mercenary would have such high prestige in the Heavenly Wind Mercenary City? He was just a young man who hadn't even reached the Exalted Realm. How could he make the mercenaries of Heavenly Wind Mercenary City so obedient? Chu Yuqing's expression was one of anger. Chu Yufei, and the others had been paying attention to Luo Qingtong. She watched as the mercenaries came out one by one to support Luo Qingtong. Everyone's faces were indescribably twisted. How could this be? Luo Xiaoqi is such a bitch. How can she command so many mercenaries? Chu Ker's voice was sharp. She almost couldn't control herself and screamed. But even so, her voice was still a deep growl. At the same time, she grabbed Chu Yufei's hand tightly. Chu Yufei's hand was so tight that the back of her hand was about to bleed. But Chu Yufei didn't seem to notice. She bit her lip and looked in Luo Qingtong's direction. Her face was filled with unwillingness. She'd thought that Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to escape. She hadn't expected that she would be able to gain the support of these mercenaries. But so what if that was the case? If she'd only offended them, then Chu Yuqing would have stopped when he saw this scene. Chapter 26-20. Although the mercenaries around her were strong, how could they be a match for the guards behind Chu Yuqing and the other top disciples? Thinking of this, Chu Yufei sneered again. Feng Yu, Bei Qing, and the others were also stunned when they saw so many mercenaries walking over. The evil physician is indeed the evil physician. They murmured in their hearts. If anyone else had encountered such a situation, they would have died a long time ago. Yet, the evil physician always had unexpected things happening. These mercenaries were actually so supportive of the evil physician. How could any random person do such a thing? After all, how long had Luo Qingtong stayed in Mercenary City? Wasn't her prestige a little too high? Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had always known that Luo Qingtong was powerful, but they didn't expect her to be so powerful. 4 ordinary people, if they were suddenly teleported from a 9-star star field or even from a low-level continent to a high-rank star field, they would be lucky if they could keep themselves alive. How could they be like Luo Qingtong, who was able to survive in a 6-star region despite her lowly strength? Everyone had chased after Luo Qingtong all the way here. Whether it was in Heavenly Wind Inscription City, Heavenly Wind Mercenary City, or this abandoned continent, they were all impressed by Luo Qingtong's methods. In their entire lives, they would probably only meet one extraordinary woman like the evil physician. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were all amazed. Yi Qianxian tilted his head slightly and looked at the young man beside him. He held back his gaze and didn't say anything. Otherwise, he might not be able to stop himself from pulling Luo Qingtong into his arms and holding her tightly. This was the woman he had his eyes on. Even if he wasn't by her side, even if she was in a dangerous situation, she would still be able to deal with it calmly. This kind of Luo Qingtong made Yi Qianxian love and feel proud of her. He was also very worried about his gains and losses. This woman was like the wind. He always felt that if he didn't hold her tightly, she would disappear without a trace. Yet, she was so powerful that Yi Qianxian really couldn't do anything to her. Usually, it was others who admired him, worried about his gains and losses, and loved him so much that they died because of him. Only when it was his turn did he know how difficult it was to fall in love with someone. Yi Qianxian's gaze deepened. Luo Qingtong looked at the mercenaries standing behind her with a look of surprise. She didn't expect these people to stand by her side. Previously, when she helped them, she was indeed thinking of borrowing their strength when the fight for the Tianluo grass began. But at that time, she only thought that if they didn't do anything to her, she would have a chance to fish in troubled waters. She didn't expect that they would stand by her side when she faced with danger. Sure enough, they were the most loyal and righteous people. Although these mercenaries were despised by those big powers and aristocratic families for having shallow foundations and being uncouth, in Luo Qingtong's eyes, they were much better than those big powers and aristocratic families who spoke of righteousness, but in the end, stabbed her in the back. At least these people knew what it meant to repay kindness. Luo Qingtong glanced at these people, then looked at Chu Yuqing. She hadn't said a word since the other party had opened his mouth. It wasn't that she had nothing to say, but that she was too lazy to say anything. With Yi Qianxian and the others here, Luo Qingtong knew that she wouldn't be in any danger. Thus, she couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Chu Yuqing and let him perform his one-man show. "You're very good. Since you're in a hurry to die, I'll fulfill your wish." As he spoke, he sternly shouted, "Chu Hanyu, help me capture her." Chu Hanyu was the name of one of the 9th Elder's top disciples. Chu Yuqing's words meant that he wanted these top disciples to help him capture Luo Qingtong and kill Gu Yifeng and the others. Since these people wanted to help Luo Xiaoqi, they should be prepared to die. Did they really think that he wouldn't dare touch them just because they were on Chu Xiaofeng's side? Chapter 26-22. Chu Yuqing sneered and raised his hand, ordering the guards behind him to rush forward. The guards of Chu Hanyu and the others beside him also moved. However, just as they rushed out, a thunderous explosion resounded in everyone's ears. "Let's see who dares to touch her." As he spoke, a figure swept over from the distance like a whirlwind. In an instant, it appeared in front of Luo Qingtong and the others. In an instant, a guard who was about to approach Luo Qingtong and the others was blasted away by the figure. Roar! Following the roar of the figure, everyone discovered that the figure was riding a giant white beast. The giant beast's 4 limbs were on the ground. Its fur was elegant and smooth, and it had a long fluffy tail that swayed in the air. It had a pair of reddish-gold eyes that looked exceptionally noble and domineering. Sitting on its back was a man wearing a pale blue robe. The robe on his body also looked very wild and domineering. His eyes were red with anger, and he looked at Chu Yuqing and the others with the same ferocity of a wild beast. "You dare hurt me?" Chu Lingfeng's expression was fierce. He was just about to say the word master, when he remembered Luo Qingtong's previous warning. She had told him not to reveal her identity in front of others, and he immediately swallowed the words back down. He said coldly, "You dare hurt my people. You're courting death." Luo Qingtong heard his words and felt her stomach twist. Where did this guy learn to make such a domineering declaration? If it had been Chu Xiaofeng who said it, it wouldn't have been a problem, but if it had been him, she wasn't even considered one of his people, right? Forget it, she couldn't ask too much of him. It was fine as long as he didn't call her master. She could be considered to have muddled her way through. After all, he was standing in front of her and the others. This included Chu Xiaofeng. She should be considered one of his people, right? In that case he could also be considered a blockhead. With that in mind, Luo Qingtong quickly glanced at Yi Qianxian. The latter's face was hidden behind the white jade mask, making him look unfathomable. On the other side, when Chu Yuqing and the others saw Chu Lingfeng appear, their faces were filled with indescribable shock. "You idiot, why are you here?" Chu Yuqing was so shocked that he forgot to hide it. He directly called out the word idiot. As for Chu Ke and the others, they looked to Chu Lingfeng with astonishment in their eyes. It was as if they had seen a ghost. Wasn't Chu Lingfeng killed by Chu Yuqing? Not only that, but he was also heavily injured. If Luo Qingtong hadn't suddenly appeared to save him, he would have died at Chu Yuqing's hands. Why was it that his current situation was completely different from what Chu Yuqing and the others had described? How did Chu Lingfeng look like he was heavily injured? When he'd sent that guard flying, how did he look like he'd used up all his blood? Not only that, but when everyone saw the aura of power rippling from Chu Lingfeng's body, their eyes widened. They looked at Chu Lingfeng in shock. They discovered that he'd actually advanced to the human martial realm. He was the first person in this generation of the Tianfeng Chu family to advance to the human martial realm. Chapter 26-23. Everyone was shocked, but Chu Lingfeng didn't feel anything. He'd long since reached the peak of the 9th level of the Amethyst Elder, and was only one step away from breaking through to the human martial realm. Of course, many people would take a long time to take this step. But Chu Lingfeng had been ambushed this time, and his bloodline power had been completely exhausted. He'd then recovered, reaching the level of destruction before establishment. In addition, Luo Qingtong had broken the contract with Snowball, allowing him to form a contract with Snowball. Under the stimulation of these two factors, Chu Lingfeng had broken through the 9th level of the Amethyst Elder, and reached the human martial realm. It was precisely because he needed to break through that Chu Lingfeng hadn't appeared in the heart of the continent in time. Otherwise, how would that trash Chu Yuqing have had the chance to bully his master? As Chu Lingfeng thought this, the scene of Chu Yuqing and the others trying to make a move on Luo Qingtong flashed through his mind. Immediately, a wave of ruthlessness surged in his heart, and he grinned maliciously at them. "What? Are you unhappy that I didn't die? Don't worry, you'll be even more unhappy later. And cry even more miserably." Chu Lingfeng's expression was cold and ruthless. At this moment he didn't look the least bit foolish. In fact, Chu Lingfeng would immediately become like a ferocious beast when it came to matters of battle. His entire person would become incomparably cold and ruthless. At that time he looked just like a ferocious beast in human form. He was born for battle. If not for his straightforward and honest nature, Chu Yuqing and the others wouldn't have dared to oppose Chu Lingfeng in this state, let alone try to ambush and kill him. Chu Lingfeng, who'd entered battle mode, didn't show the slightest bit of foolishness. Even Chu Yuqing and the others, after scheming against Chu Lingfeng, were only able to kill him by surrounding and killing him. They couldn't use any other method. Because Chu Lingfeng's strength wasn't something that ordinary people could compare to. And in battle mode he wasn't so easy to deceive. His battle instincts were better than anyone else's. When he saw Chu Lingfeng like this, Chu Yuqing's face instantly turned deathly pale. He couldn't help but take a step back. It was the same for the people behind him. Especially the Tianfeng Chu clan's disciples who followed behind him and the other top disciples. They were on the verge of tears under Chu Lingfeng's gaze. Everyone knew that although this new young master was simple and honest, his reverse scale was not to be touched. In the past, when he had just arrived at Tianfeng Chu's home, there were people who bullied him because of his straightforward nature. They openly slandered Yan Yang in front of him and called his mother a slut. She thought that with Chu Lingfeng's simple and honest personality, he wouldn't do anything even if he heard it. Who would have thought that Chu Lingfeng would go berserk and tear apart the Tianfeng Chu clan's disciple with bloodshot eyes? Since then, everyone knew how terrifying Chu Lingfeng was. They knew that they couldn't touch his reverse scale in front of him. Chu Lingfeng was a tyrannical person. He protected his food and all resources. Once he set his mind on something or someone, no matter what others said, he wouldn't change his mind. If someone dared to make a move against him, he didn't know what it meant to hold back. He'd directly beat the other party half to death. Unless they used resources to trade with him, it was possible that he'd beat them to death. Even the family head and the elders couldn't do anything to him. Many of the top disciples present had already suffered at his hands, not to mention Chu Yuqing and the others. They were the first to find trouble with Chu Lingfeng. In the end, they were also the ones who'd been beaten to a pulp. Chapter 26-24. Needless to say, the guards behind them were even more shocked. They looked at Chu Lingfeng's figure with shock and fear. Their faces were filled with indescribable terror. The young master of the Tianfeng Chu family hadn't died. He didn't even seem to have suffered any serious injuries, nor did he seem to have exhausted his bloodline power. Not only that, but his strength had also increased. He had become the first person of the Tianfeng Chu family's generation to reach the human martial arts realm. He was truly the first person. They had participated in Chu Yuqing's plan. They had been ordered by him to kill Chu Lingfeng. What would happen to them now? Everyone's teeth chattered as they wondered this. Chu Lingfeng didn't even bother to pay attention to them. After he finished speaking, he immediately turned around and looked at Luo Qingtong. "Mas, Luo Qingtong, are you all right?" Chu Lingfeng's voice was very loud. The word mas was twisted so stiffly that it almost jumped out of his mouth. Fortunately, he remembered Luo Qingtong's instructions in time and swallowed it back down. He changed it to Luo Qingtong's alias. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Although she knew that she couldn't expect too much from him, she still couldn't help but cover her face. Oh my god, this idiot. You should have asked Chu Xiaofeng first. However, Luo Qingtong also knew that it was asking too much for Chu Lingfeng to put others before his concern for her. Didn't he see that Chu Lingfeng had been staring at her from the moment he appeared? He didn't even look at Chu Xiaofeng and the others. If she made him act too much, it would be too out of character. That wouldn't be good. It was better to be like this now. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong could only smooth things over. "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, young master." As she said this, she immediately explained to Chu Lingfeng and the others, "I saved young Master Chu's life before and healed his injuries." Luo Qingtong's words made Gu Yifeng and the others, who were stunned by Chu Lingfeng's unusual actions, feel relieved. So that's how it is. I was wondering how little Seven knew the young master. Chu Xiaofeng was also very surprised, but at this moment he had already relaxed. Chu Lingfeng's previous words were very clear. It was very clear that Chu Yuqing and the others had already made a move against Chu Lingfeng. This should be the reason why Luo Shaoqi saved Chu Lingfeng's life and healed his injuries. However, when he thought that Luo Qingtong had saved Chu Lingfeng's life, he was referring to the fact that Luo Qingtong had encountered the seriously injured Chu Lingfeng, saved him, and healed his injuries. What he didn't know was that Luo Qingtong had single-handedly charged into the encirclement of Chu Yuqing and the others, and forcibly rescued Chu Lingfeng from a hopeless situation. Even if they were beaten to death, they would never have imagined that Luo Qingtong would be able to do such a thing and even succeed. Everyone's expressions suddenly became clear. Even Chu Qiankong and the others thought so. Only Chu Yuqing and the others knew what was going on. They looked at Luo Qingtong and gritted their teeth. If it weren't for this youth, they wouldn't have fallen into such a situation. On the other hand, Yi Qianren faintly raised her eyebrows. Was this woman deliberately saying this for him to hear? In order to continue hiding her identity, she's really going all out. She's drawing a clear line between herself and Chu Lingfeng. Yi Qianshen's lips curled slightly, but he didn't say anything. His deep and solemn eyes didn't reveal the slightest bit of emotion or fluctuation. Luo Qingtong looked at him and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. This should be a cover-up, right? Chapter 26-25. Leave her to me. He stretched out his hand towards Yi Qianxian. His eyes, which were red because of his wildness, stared straight at Yi Qianxian. "I will protect her." When Chu Lingfeng said this, Luo Qingtong almost bit her own tongue. She had never thought that Chu Lingfeng would do something like this. The corners of her lips twitched as she watched Chu Lingfeng stare at Yi Qianxian. She suddenly felt a headache coming on. In this situation, from other people's point of view, staying by Chu Lingfeng's side was indeed the best choice. But only Luo Qingtong knew that staying by Yi Qianxian's side was the best choice. But this was not the main point. The main point was that Chu Lingfeng's words were too ambiguous and ambiguous. Those who knew, such as Luo Qingtong, knew that he really wanted to protect her. But in other people's ears, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched violently. There's no need, young Master Chu. Before Luo Qingtong could finish her sentence, Chu Lingfeng's voice suddenly rose. Of course. You just stay by my side. When Chu Lingfeng said this, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched even more. This guy even knew how to interrupt. Who taught him that? But why was he so insistent on getting her to his side? Was he worried about her safety? As Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, she heard Yi Qianxian's cold voice. There's no need. I took her protection fee, so I will naturally protect her. There's no need for young Master Chu to worry. As Yi Qianxian spoke, he tightened his grip on Luo Qingtong's waist. As it turned out, when Chu Yuqing and the others were about to attack them, he had already taken Luo Qingtong into his arms. If Chu Lingfeng had come just a little later, Chu Yuqing and the others would have already died without a burial site. However, it was also good that Chu Lingfeng was here. It saved them the trouble of making a move. However, Yi Qianxian didn't expect that Luo Qingtong's right-hand man would snatch her away from him as soon as he arrived. Why did she have to stay by his side as long as he protected her? Yi Qianxian sneered. His woman should naturally stay by his side. Therefore Yi Qianxian showed no signs of letting him go. Not only that, he also used Luo Qingtong's protection fee as an excuse to block Chu Lingfeng. After all, he had taken someone's money and had to take care of their problems. There was naturally a reason why he was so protective of Luo Xiaoqi. Otherwise, how could he explain his actions? Yi Qianxian wasn't ready to let Luo Qingtong know that he had seen through her identity. The two of them faced off just like that. Yi Qianxian's voice was cold. The moment he opened his mouth, Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others spontaneously stood behind him. Behind Chu Lingfeng, a group of people from the Tianfeng Chu clan had also gathered. These people had all just arrived. They were from the Tianfeng Chu clan. Among them was the 8th elder's top disciple, Chu Jingyi. Seeing the confrontation in front of him, Chu Jingyi was at a complete loss. He looked at Chu Xiaofeng beside him and asked, "What's going on? Why are they confronting each other?" Chu Jingyi had just arrived, but he had already learned what had happened from the people around him. Naturally, he knew that Yi Qianxian was on Chu Lingfeng's side. But why were they confronting each other now? And Luo Xiaoqi was also involved in it? Chu Jingyi looked at Luo Qingtong being held by Chu Lingfeng while Yi Qianxian was holding her waist. Suddenly an idea popped into his mind. She didn't know why Chu Lingfeng, that blockhead, was so insistent on her going over to his side. But Chu Yuqing's explanation was better than having Luo Qingtong's identity exposed by Yi Qianxian. Chu Lingfeng's eyes were cold and he completely ignored Chu Yuqing. His pair of beastly red eyes stared fixedly at Yi Qianxian and said, "Let go. My master isn't someone you can touch." Just as he was about to speak, he remembered Luo Qingtong's previous instructions. He immediately swallowed the rest of his words and changed them to Chapter 26-27. Oh my God. Luo Qingtong covered her face with her hands. She really couldn't bear to watch. Fortunately, Chu Yuqing had already found an excellent excuse for her. Otherwise, with Chu Lingfeng's provocative actions, her identity would definitely be exposed. Was this guy here specifically to subdue her? She had told him not to call her master in front of outsiders. He hadn't called her that. But this intimate gesture, this ambiguous way of speaking, what was the difference between that and calling her master? It was simply a pain in the ass. Luo Qingtong felt that she had really been miserably tricked by Chu Lingfeng, this big blockhead. She didn't know whether to call this guy obedient or loyal. Whether it was letting her go over to his side, or letting Yi Qianxian let go, Chu Lingfeng was doing it for her own good. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. She couldn't blame Chu Lingfeng. When Yi Qianxian heard Chu Lingfeng's words, he immediately laughed. Behind his white jade mask, a brilliant light shone in all directions. That extremely handsome face was now full of smiles, but it was because of anger. "Your people?" Yi Qianxian sneered at Chu Lingfeng. If he didn't know that this big blockhead was Luo Qingtong's person, and that his loyalty to her was unquestionable, without the slightest bit of impurity, he would have already killed him. Just based on Chu Lingfeng's words alone, he would have made him bleed on the spot. When had his woman become someone else's person? Did this woman make him say this? Yi Qianxian's eyes looked dangerously at Luo Qingtong. The corners of the latter's lips twitched. Seeing that Chu Lingfeng and Yi Qianxian were getting more and more hostile, and that a fight might break out in the next moment, she hurriedly said to Yi Qianxian, "Cough, brother, I'm sorry. I'll go over first to inform young Master Chu." After saying this, she explained to Yi Qianxian in a low voice, "You should be able to see that young Master Chu's temperament is different from that of ordinary people. He wants me to go over now, probably to repay me for saving his life. He wants to protect me well. Brother, you shouldn't argue with him, so as to avoid delaying the fight for the heavenly grass." Luo Qingtong's words were very reasonable. She even explained Chu Lingfeng's excessive closeness and protectiveness to her perfectly. This cunning woman. Yi Qianxian snorted coldly. Although he didn't want to let go of Luo Qingtong, he didn't want to expose Luo Qingtong. However, he wasn't prepared to expose Luo Qingtong's identity yet, so he had no reason to keep her here. After all, although he considered himself as Luo Qingtong's protector, Luo Qingtong had requested to go over to Chu Lingfeng's side. He couldn't stop her. Thinking of this, he immediately let go of Luo Qingtong's waist. Chu Lingfeng's eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't control the bestial nature in his body and wanted to make a move. Or was it because Luo Qingtong was by Yi Qianxian's side? He was afraid of hurting Luo Qingtong, so he deliberately suppressed the violence in his body. Otherwise, according to his reckless temper, he would definitely beat her up first. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's snatch Master first. The man in front of her was too rude. He actually dared to make a move on her master. He even hugged Master's waist. How could this be? Even if Master was a man, it still wasn't allowed. Chu Lingfeng pulled Luo Qingtong to his side. He looked at Yi Qianxian with a face full of vigilance and hostility. It was as if he had done something unpardonable. Luo Qingtong found it funny. She lowered her voice and asked, "What's the matter? Do you have a grudge against him? Otherwise, why would he insist on taking her over?" Chapter 26-28. Luo Qingtong knew that Chu Lingfeng didn't know about Yi Qianxian's current identity. In order to prevent him from exposing himself, Luo Qingtong didn't tell him. "Moss. Shaoqi, don't go near him." Chu Lingfeng looked at Luo Qingtong gloomily and said, "The person who likes you won't be happy. Don't abandon me after having sex with me." Chu Lingfeng, the blockhead, wanted to say, "Ming Zun won't be happy. Master, don't abandon me after having sex with me." But there were so many people around, and Luo Qingtong didn't allow him to reveal her identity. After thinking for a while, he forced himself to say this. However, he didn't expect that his words, coupled with his declaration to Yi Qianxian, would be so ambiguous. At this moment, even if Chu Lingfeng told everyone that he didn't have any feelings for Luo Qingtong, no one would believe him. The expressions of the Tianfeng Chu clan members were very interesting. As for Gu Yifeng and the other mercenaries, they were all dumbfounded. Damn. The young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan really did have such feelings for Luo Shaoqi. Everyone had originally thought that Chu Yuqing was spouting nonsense, but Chu Lingfeng's words proved that he was telling the truth. Chu Lingfeng's feelings for Luo Shaoqi were really impure. As for Chu Jingyi and Chu Xiaofeng, they were even more shocked. Wait a minute, the young master is a homosexual. The corners of Chu Jingyi's lips twitched. He didn't know what to say. Chu Lingfeng was the only direct descendant of the Tianfeng Chu clan. If he was a homosexual, the elders of the clan would probably explode. Even the head of the clan wouldn't ignore it. Chu Xiaofeng stared at Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng in bewilderment. Oh my god, this is too explosive. How could Luo Shaoqi and young master have such a relationship? While everyone was shocked and dumbfounded, Luo Qingtong was so shocked by Chu Lingfeng's words that she slipped and almost fell to the ground. "Is that why you purposely brought me to your side?" She was wondering why Chu Lingfeng, this big blockhead, looked like he was going all out with Yi Qianxian. It was impossible for the two of them to know each other. Chu Lingfeng didn't know Yi Qianxian's identity either. After Luo Qingtong figured out the meaning of Chu Lingfeng's words, she suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Her lips twitched and she didn't know what to say to Chu Lingfeng. Did this blockhead know that the white jade-masked man he was talking about was Yi Qianxian? He even told her not to get too close to him. Luo Qingtong's heart was angry and funny for a while. When Chu Lingfeng heard her words, he thought she was blaming him. He suddenly felt more depressed in his heart. He knew that he should listen to his master. Whoever his master wanted to be with had nothing to do with him. But since he was with Luo Qingtong, he knew that Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were a couple. Ming Zun was so good to his master. He was powerful, strong and handsome. In Chu Lingfeng's mind, only Ming Zun was so good to Luo Qingtong. Ming Zun was always the first to arrive when Luo Qingtong was in danger. Ming Zun was the only one who cared about Luo Qingtong in every way possible. He was more concerned about her than the people who followed her through life and death. He was the one they recognized as the one who was qualified to stand beside Luo Qingtong. Chu Lingfeng regarded Luo Qingtong as a belief and a god. In his mind, no one was more powerful than Luo Qingtong. Chapter 26-29. But Ming Zun was different. He was sincerely good to Master and put Master in his heart. Chu Lingfeng and the others only admitted that he was by Luo Qingtong's side. Seeing that Luo Qingtong blamed him for this, his heart suddenly felt very sad. Chu Lingfeng was not good with words and didn't know what to say. He was afraid that if he said too much, he would annoy Master. But he also didn't want Luo Qingtong to abandon Yi Qianxian and choose someone else. No one was more suitable for Master than Ming Zun. He had to protect Master for Ming Zun, so that Master wouldn't be deceived by someone with ulterior motives. Thinking of this, he immediately glared at Yi Qianxian and then shouted at Luo Qingtong, "I don't care. Anyway, I won't let you be with someone else." Hearing his words, Luo Qingtong almost spat out her saliva. "Damn. Chu Lingfeng, you big fool. Do you know what you are saying now? What do you mean you won't let me be with someone else? What's with this overbearing CEO's declaration?" Luo Qingtong's eyes twitched fiercely and she didn't dare to look at Yi Qianxian's direction. Chu Lingfeng, this guy, was King naturally evil. From the moment he appeared, every word and sentence was like digging a hole for her to die. This guy wasn't actually her subordinate, but her enemy. Luo Qingtong was about to shed tears of sadness for herself. While her heart was tangled on the other side, Yi Qianxian looked at her and Chu Lingfeng with an unfathomable gaze. Naturally, he had heard the conversation between the two of them. Chu Lingfeng said that the person who likes you will not be happy, and asked Luo Qingtong not to abandon him. Yi Qianxian guessed that that person should be referring to himself. After all, he knew Luo Qingtong's identity. Other than him, no one else could be worthy of Luo Qingtong's words of abandoning him. He didn't expect Chu Lingfeng, this big fool, to be so protective of him. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent. He didn't take the matter of Chu Lingfeng snatching Luo Qingtong away from his side so seriously. On the contrary, Luo Qingtong's expression at this moment made him feel very satisfied. This woman is used to acting. All day long she's tricking left and right. She probably didn't expect to be tricked so miserably by her own people, right? Yi Qianxian coldly snorted in his heart. He made up his mind to pretend that he didn't know anything. He was determined not to expose Luo Qingtong's identity. Let her be tangled up like this. Let's see how she explains it to me in the future. Yi Qianxian's heart was satisfied, but his expression was indescribably leisurely and contented. Luo Qingtong didn't know that she had been seen through long ago. She was thinking about how to smooth things over with Chu Lingfeng's words. Their thoughts were different. On the other side, Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with indescribable pride. Sure enough, it was as he thought. This Chu Lingfeng had taken a fancy to Luo Shaoqi. A fool learning how to talk about love like other people. In the end, he would only be fooled by others. But although Chu Lingfeng was a fool, the people of the Tianfeng Chu family weren't fools, right? As Chu Yuqing thought this, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He had just been thinking about how to extricate himself from this matter. After all, if Chu Lingfeng didn't die, then the unlucky one would be him. All the plans he'd made before were now useless. Normally, these people wouldn't have dared to make a move against Chu Lingfeng. But now that they had a good reason to do so, they couldn't help but be moved. This was too rare. This opportunity was too hard to come by. Furthermore, it would allow them to go all out in the open without any reservations. Their hearts immediately started thumping violently. Unknowingly, they had gathered around Chu Yuqing from all directions. Chapter 26-31. Kill Chu Lingfeng? This way, no matter who became the head of the family, the elder council under their control would not be weakened. After all, in this generation Chu Tianyi held absolute power. In the Tianfeng Chu family, his words were absolute, and the elder council's power was weakened to the extreme. They didn't want to see themselves being oppressed by Chu Lingfeng like their parents when they were in charge of the elder hall. The other party had inherited Chu Tianyi's bloodline, and was extremely terrifying. If they could strangle him here, everyone's hearts were stirred. They would not take the initiative to attack Chu Lingfeng, but if there was a chance to kill Chu Lingfeng, they would definitely not refuse. The eyes of the Tianfeng Chu family members flashed, but the faces of Chu Lingfeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others suddenly became solemn. Not good. Chu Yuqing has designs on the young master. Chu Jingyi's eyes were cold as he swept his gaze over the faces of the Tianfeng Chu family members. His heart immediately sank. He hadn't expected Chu Yuqing to find such an excuse to make trouble. This was troublesome. However, Chu Jingyi also knew that after Chu Yuqing failed to kill Chu Lingfeng, he would not rest until the latter was dead. Even if Chu Yuqing did not use Luo Shaoqi as an excuse, he would find other ways to make trouble. This had nothing to do with Luo Shaoqi. She just happened to give Chu Yuqing a reason. The real fuse was that Chu Yuqing wanted to kill Chu Lingfeng. He would not let Chu Lingfeng leave the abandoned continent alive. Otherwise, the one who would die in the end would be him. Chu Jingyi thought so, but he did not blame Luo Qingtong. Instead, he coldly said to Chu Xiaofeng and the others, "Protect the young master well. Chu Yuqing, aren't you meddling too much? What does it have to do with you who the young master likes? Even if the family doesn't allow it, the elders will naturally make a decision after we leave the abandoned continent. It's not your place to meddle." Chu Yuqing sneered at them. The eighth elder's people were the patriarch's sworn supporters. There was no need for him to be courteous to them. In any case, they would definitely stand on Chu Lingfeng's side. At that time he would kill them all. As Chu Yuqing thought this, his expression darkened and he smiled proudly. "Chu Jingyi, what are you saying? Us top disciples have been nurtured by our families. Naturally, we have to share the burden of our families. He's just a small mercenary. Just kill him. Why do we have to alarm the elders and have them make a move? There's no need to bother them." As Chu Yuqing spoke, he chuckled darkly. "Instead, it's you who are so protective of her. Could it be that you were the ones who instigated this? Did you introduce such a troublemaker to the young lord?" When he said this, his face suddenly turned solemn and he shouted sternly, "I think you all have bad intentions. After we kill Luo Shaoqi, we'll hold you accountable. If you dare to stop us, we'll treat you as her accomplice and deal with you together." Chu Yuqing's words had already revealed his ferocious side. His ambition and killing intent were as clear as day. "Attack, surround them. Young lord, please forgive us." There was no need for him to intervene. Yi Qianxian was happy to let Luo Qingtong resolve this herself. He liked to see this woman's radiant appearance very much. Although he was always gloomy about this person's craftiness and fickleness, and how she didn't like to rely on him, Yi Qianxian knew that it was precisely this type of Luo Qingtong that deeply attracted him. Whether she was crafty and fickle-minded, eccentric, arrogant, domineering, or insufferably arrogant, he liked it all. Moreover, he was happy to discover more different sides of her. Yi Qianxian's words stunned Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others. "Master?" They looked at Yi Qianxian. They didn't know if the latter was angry at Luo Qingtong and wanted to make her suffer before making a move. But there was nothing between the demonic physician and Chu Lingfeng. They could all tell that their master couldn't have been so blinded by the situation that he didn't notice anything, right? As Fengyu thought this, she immediately opened her mouth to mediate. Chapter 2633. Calamity? Luo Qingtong chuckled as she looked in Chu Yuqing's direction. "Young Master Yuqing has already pinned such a big label on me. If I don't do something, it really seems like I'll be living up to this reputation of being a calamity. What a loss." Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. Her smile, which was covered by her birthmark, revealed 3 parts malevolence and 7 parts devilish charm. Speaking of which, it was strange. Luo Qingtong's appearance was so ugly that no one would be able to look directly at her. But in front of everyone, her ugly face covered with birthmarks was always overlooked. Not only that, but when she smiled, her 3 parts malevolent and 7 parts ugly appearance gave people an indescribable feeling of breathtaking grace. But Luo Qingtong's appearance was clearly extremely ugly. No one knew where this breathtaking feeling came from, but it just so happened that they had such a feeling. When Luo Qingtong's words came out, Chu Yuqing immediately sneered. In his opinion, Luo Qingtong was struggling on her deathbed. Just based on the fact that he had something on Chu Lingfeng, he could easily kill Luo Qingtong. Not only that, but even Chu Lingfeng wouldn't be able to escape this fate. Luo Qingtong had previously rescued Chu Lingfeng from his encirclement. But this time, almost all the members of the Chu clan were on his side. How could her people be compared to the guards of the Chu clan of Heavenly Wind? Chu Lingfeng's side only had Chu Jingyi, Chu Xiaofeng, and 8th Elder's people. Apart from them, there were no other reinforcements. What else could Luo Qingtong do? Solidify her reputation as a calamity? If she died, then her reputation as a calamity would be solidified. Not only that, but she would also implicate Chu Lingfeng and drag him down with her. As Chu Yuqing thought this, he suddenly felt an indescribable sense of victory. He looked at Luo Qingtong and sneered, "It seems that you know your crime very well. Then we won't be polite. If you want to stall for more time and talk nonsense, then let me tell you, don't waste your time. Because we are loyal to our families and the protection of our families. In order to persuade the young lord not to do anything stupid, we will spare no effort." That's right, Chu Yuqing's words were a warning to Luo Qingtong not to try any more tricks. Among the Tianfeng Chu clan members present, other than the 8th elder who was absolutely loyal to the clan head, the rest of them couldn't wait for Chu Lingfeng to die. Previously he didn't have a reason. But now, he had provided these people with an open and honorable reason to not be afraid of being punished. Under these circumstances, it didn't matter how much scheming and eloquence Luo Qingtong had. Even if she could turn a dead person into a living one, it wouldn't be of any use. Compared to the benefits of killing Chu Lingfeng, even something as important as obtaining the Tianluo grass couldn't compare. Otherwise, how could these people ignore the fact that the heart of the continent was about to open after hearing his words? Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were dead meat. No one on this abandoned continent could save them. However, as soon as Chu Yuqing spoke, Luo Qingtong's words were mixed with a bit of ridicule, coldness, and contempt. Is that so? Then young Master Yuqing, you'd better watch carefully. Watch how this calamity overturns the heavens and earth and overturns the rain with a flip of my hand. Chapter 26:34. The latter and the others were watching the internal strife of the Tianfeng Chu family. They even stood far away so that it would be easier for the people of the Tianfeng Chu family to take action. Are you sure you want to just stand by and watch? Luo Qingtong put on a faint smile. Together with the huge birthmark on her face, her devilish temperament was revealed again. Her eyes were fixed on the man in the front who was surrounded by the top disciples of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan. Compared with the chaos of the Tianfeng Chu family, the people of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan were much more orderly. All the disciples of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan who had hurried over were following the man on their own accord. Those who were dressed like top disciples were clustered around him, while the others were scattered in the surroundings. They were arranged in order according to their cultivation and status. There was no noise or chaos at all. It was not hard to imagine how prestigious the man was in the Lian family of the Flying Star clan. At this moment, hearing Luo Qingtong's words, all the people of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan raised their heads and looked at Luo Qingtong. The man was no exception. "Are you talking to me?" His thin lips parted slightly. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes when he looked at Luo Qingtong. He probably didn't expect that Luo Qingtong would speak to the people of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan at this moment. Yes. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent, and she looked indescribably calm. She looked at the man with a smile and said, "Of course, if there is another person here who can be the master of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan, you can take it that I'm not talking to you." Hearing that, Lian Xingqian narrowed his eyes immediately. He looked at Luo Qingtong and observed her carefully. Then he chuckled. "Then what do you want to talk to me about? Or rather, what do you want me to do for you?" Lian Xingqian's words were full of interest. Not because of anything else but because Luo Qingtong was really different from the rest. At this time, the Tianfeng Chu family wanted to kill her, and even used this opportunity to attack the young master of the Chu family. She actually spoke to him. Not only that, she seemed to be asking for help from the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. This was interesting. The Lian clan of the Flying Star planet was on the opposite side of the Tianfeng Chu clan, at least for now. Both from his perspective and from the perspective of the entire Lian family of the Flying Star sector, they all hoped that the Tianfeng Chu family would have internal strife. It would be best if the fight was as intense as possible. In that case, the Lian family of the Flying Star sector would naturally win the competition for the Heavenly Luo grass. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong actually asked them for help. Didn't she know that they couldn't possibly help her? Before Luo Qingtong could reply to Lian Xingqian, Chu Yuqing had already burst into laughter. "Haha, Luo Xiaoqi, I think you've lost your mind. You actually asked for help from the Lian family of the Flying Star sector? Why would they interfere with the affairs of the Tianfeng Chu clan? That will only bring trouble to themselves. Moreover, the competition for the Heavenly Luo grass was imminent. The Tianfeng Chu clan was only doing this because they knew that killing Chu Lingfeng would bring them great benefits. Why would the Lian family of the Flying Star sector give up this great opportunity to help Chu Lingfeng while the Tianfeng Chu clan was fighting among themselves? Chapter 2635. Hearing Chu Yuqing's words, the other members of the Tianfeng Chu clan around him also showed faint expressions of mockery. Their gazes towards Luo Qingtong were full of scorn and disdain. Seeing this scene, Chu Ke'er and Chu Yufei also showed smug smiles on their faces. Sister Yufei, this Luo Xiaoqi is dead for sure this time. It's ridiculous that she actually wants the Lian family of the Flying Star clan to help her. What a joke. Does she really think she's a beauty who can bring disaster to a country? She's an ugly man. Does she really think she's so charming that the young master of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan will help her regardless of everything? Chu Ke'er covered her mouth and giggled. Her smile was full of malice. Hearing this, Chu Yufei also covered her mouth and giggled. Their smiles were indescribably bright and happy. Seeing Luo Qingtong suffer and be humiliated, they felt indescribably happy. Maybe young master Luo Xiaoqi is confident. Chu Yufei's voice was soft. She had always been gentle and kind in front of others, but this time she couldn't help but feel happy in her heart. Her words were full of contempt. She almost directly said that Luo Qingtong was shameless and felt good about herself. Ah! Hearing this, Chu Ke'er couldn't help but laugh out loud. While the two of them were in a good mood, Chu Xiaofeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others were very surprised. Especially Chu Jingyi. Looking at Luo Qingtong, he immediately frowned. His little cousin had said that she wasn't an ordinary person and was very capable. Now it seemed that she was just an ordinary young man. She was actually so flustered when she encountered such a thing. Asking the Lian family of the Flying Star clan for help was no different from asking for humiliation. However, Chu Jingyi couldn't blame Luo Qingtong. After all, no one would be able to calm down in such a situation. Luo Qingtong was a young man with average strength and no reputation. She was also a mercenary with no background or experience. It was already very rare for her to think of asking the Lian family of the Flying Star clan for help. At least she wasn't scared to the point of tears and snot running down her face and begging Chu Yuqing for mercy. If that was the case, they would really lose face. It was equivalent to slapping the young master in the face. Thinking, Chu Jingyi immediately wanted to ask Luo Qingtong to stop talking to the Lian family of the Flying Star clan. After all, the other party would not provide them with any help. Instead, they would watch the show from the sidelines. However, before he could speak, Luo Qingtong's Luo's voice. Young master, you've misunderstood. Luo Qingtong's lips were light, and her smile was charming and demonic. Luo's family of the Flying Star clan of the Flying Star clan. On the other hand, the Lian family of the Flying Star sector should be asking for our help. As soon as she said that, everyone's faces froze. Especially the Lian family of the Flying Star clan. They all looked at Luo Qingtong with strange expressions. Was this person crazy? Were they in such a hurry to help her? And begging her to let them help her? This was the biggest joke in the world. Not to mention that she was currently in a disadvantageous position against the young master of the Chu family. She was already doomed. Even if they weren't, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to help her, much less meddle in the affairs of the Tianfeng Chu family. Chapter 2636. By now, Lian Xingqian had retracted the hint of interest in his eyes. He frowned at Luo Qingtong. Was she trying to pester him endlessly? Did she think that a few words of provocation would make him help her deal with Chu Yuqing and the others? If that was the case, then there was no point in doing so. Lian Xingqian's expression was impassive. He'd originally thought that this extraordinary youth would say something astonishing. He'd been looking forward to it. He hadn't expected her to be so crude and scheming. As the young master of the Flying Star Lian family, Lian Xingqian had seen all sorts of schemes. Luo Qingtong's provocation was child's play for him. If you're trying to say that I'm afraid of Chu Yuqing, then you don't have to say anything else. As Lian Xingqian said this, he immediately wanted his men to retreat further to prevent Luo Qingtong and the others from dragging them into the trap of dealing with Chu Yuqing. But as soon as he raised his hand, Luo Qingtong said, "Is that so? If that's the case, then I wish the Flying Star Lian family a happy scapegoat. The crime of killing the young master of the Tianfeng Chu family is no small matter. Even if the Flying Star Lian family obtains the Tianluo grass, I'm afraid they won't be able to escape the wrath of the Tianfeng Chu family." As soon as Luo Qingtong said this, Chu Yuqing and the others' expressions changed. Even Lian Xingqian's hand froze in midair. I don't understand what you mean. He looked at Luo Qingtong. His seemingly gentle but actually sharp eyes focused on Luo Qingtong. Chu Lingfeng was killed by the Tianfeng Chu family. It has nothing to do with the Flying Star Lian family. Is that so? Luo Qingtong chuckled as she played with the invisible thread in her hand. She looked at Lian Xingqian and said indifferently, "Young Master Lian, do you believe me?" As she spoke, her glowing red eyes swept over Chu Yuqing and the others, whose faces had changed greatly. She laughed softly and said, "Chu Yuqing and the others killed Chu Lingfeng. Although there was a reason for it, such as me. However, young Master Chu is the only son and successor of the family head. In order to find a scapegoat, they will definitely say that they only wanted to kill me, but for some reason, young Master Chu died. Why did he die? Of course, it was the Lian family of the Flying Star sector who did it. In this way, not only will they get rid of us, but they will also shift the blame to you. Isn't this killing two birds with one stone? What do you think, young Master Lian?" So, the corners of Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She looked at Lian Xingqian and the other Lian family members behind him, whose faces had already changed. They looked at Chu Yuqing and the others warily and unkindly. She chuckled softly and said, "You can only help us. And you have to help us. Otherwise, if we die without any evidence, then young Master Lian, the Lian family of the Flying Star sector, will have no chance to refute this." As Luo Qingtong spoke, the birthmark on her face became even more devilishly charming. She looked at Lian Xingqian with a smile. "Young Master Lian, do you agree with me?" Luo Qingtong's face was impassive. She wasn't afraid that Lian Xingqian wouldn't help them. In fact, the moment she opened her mouth, she was already forcing Lian Xingqian and the others to help her. Perhaps in the minds of the Tianfeng Chu family members, it had never occurred to them to shift the blame for Chu Lingfeng's death onto the Lian family. Chapter 2637. Since she'd opened her mouth and laid out this possibility for everyone to see, Lian Xingqian had to make a choice. Gamble that the Tianfeng Chu clan wouldn't frame them, or directly intervene in this internal strife and make the possibility of being the scapegoat disappear without a trace. Which one was more time-saving and 100% safe? Did he even need to choose? Helping them was Lian Xingqian's best choice. That was all he could do. It was a joke to say that she'd begged the Lian clan. Did Chu Yuqing and the others think they could force her to use the word beg? If not for the fact that she didn't want to reveal her identity, she wouldn't even need to borrow the Lian clan's strength. Luo Qingtong looked at Lian Xingqian indifferently. On the other side, Chu Yuqing's angry voice rang out. "Nonsense. We never planned to do that. Luo Xiaoqi, don't even think about trying to frighten us. Young Master Lian, we will never implicate the Lian clan in this matter. We can swear." Before he could finish, Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Oh, I heard that silently admitting to it is a very good method. This kind of forbearance, swallowing humiliation for the sake of the family head, is much easier than complaining before. Perhaps there won't even be a little bit of punishment. Impressive, impressive. Young Master Yuqing, I'm impressed. You're really good at scheming." Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, Chu Yuqing was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "Shut up. How could this Luo Xiaoqi be so good at talking?" This was the first time in many years that Chu Yuqing felt so speechless. He couldn't even out-talk a young mercenary. He'd heard from Chu Ke and the others that Luo Xiaoqi wasn't easy to deal with. He'd snorted disdainfully before, thinking that this young man was nothing but a lowly mercenary. What was so difficult about him? Chu Ke and the others didn't have the ability, so did they think he was the same as them? Chu Yuqing was disdainful. He had always felt that Luo Qingtong had saved Chu Lingfeng because he was caught off guard, and she had taken advantage of him by surprise. Therefore he did not put Luo Qingtong in his eyes. It was only at this moment that he realized that Chu Ke and the others were not lying in the slightest. This Luo Xiaoqi was really difficult to deal with. Moreover, he was extremely cunning. He suppressed his anger and looked at Lian Xingqian, wanting to continue explaining. However, the latter's voice had already sounded. "You're right." Lian Xingqian's gaze was deep. He looked at Luo Qingtong, knowing that he had underestimated this young mercenary. He originally thought that the other party was trying to provoke him into saving them. Who would have thought that while the other party was forcing him, he wasn't trying to provoke him at all? Furthermore, he was making it so that he couldn't refuse. Just as Luo Qingtong thought, she had already put the idea of framing the Lian family of the Flying Star sector on the table. Whether or not the Tianfeng Chu family had such an idea, Lian Xingqian had to be on guard against this last move. What use was Chu Yuqing's guarantee? Just as Luo Qingtong had said, sometimes silence was a very good way to frame someone. If he trusted Chu Yuqing, he might still be betrayed. But if he helped Luo Qingtong, he could completely nip this hidden danger in the bud. Chu Yuqing wouldn't have the slightest chance to frame him. Which was better? Did he even need to choose? This young man was really making him slap his own face. Lian Xingqian's face twitched as he thought of this. Chapter 2638. Luo Xiaoqi is under my protection. He was clearly saying that Luo Xiaoqi would be under his protection. But in reality he was basically telling Chu Yuqing and the others that the Lian family of the Flying Star Realm was going to intervene. He could forget about killing Chu Lingfeng. If all the members of the Lian clan of the Flying Star Realm joined forces, they would be far stronger than Chu Yuqing and the others combined. Not to mention Luo Qingtong, Chu Lingfeng, Chu Jingyi and the others. Chu Yuqing and the others were at a disadvantage. With a wave of Lian Xingqian's hand, all of the Flying Star Lian family's disciples and guards scattered in all directions, surrounding Chu Yuqing and the others. Once they attacked Chu Lingfeng and the others, the Lian family of the Flying Star Realm would attack them as well. When the Lian family and Chu Lingfeng joined forces, Chu Yuqing and the others would be the ones to be wiped out. Seeing this, Chu Yuqing was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The smiles on Chu Ke and Chu Yufei's faces froze. What's going on? Luo Xiaoqi just said a few words and the young master of the Lian family believed her. Is he stupid? Luo Xiaoqi was just lying to him. My big brother and the others didn't even think about framing him. Chu Ke was about to go crazy. She was about to have a great opportunity to kill Luo Xiaoqi, but after she said a few words, the young master of the Lian family of the Flying Star sector actually helped her. He helped her. Chu Ke and Chu Yufei had just been laughing at Luo Qingtong, but now Luo Qingtong had turned the tables around beautifully. The more blood she wanted to vomit in her heart, the uglier her face became. However, Chu Yufei was very clear about the things that she didn't understand. She clenched her fists and looked in Luo Qingtong's direction with jealousy. The young man's scheming was simply too outstanding. He'd forced the Lian family to take action for something that hadn't even happened yet, all because he couldn't afford to gamble. The young master of the Lian family couldn't take the risk of being the scapegoat and allow Chu Yuqing and the others to attack Chu Lingfeng. So he helped Luo Xiaoqi. In his heart, he might have known that Luo Xiaoqi was the one who'd tricked him. But even if there was only a slight possibility, he could only help Luo Xiaoqi. No wonder she hadn't panicked at all, and even said that the Lian family was rushing to help her. Weren't they rushing to help her? Even if Luo Qingtong didn't want the Lian family's help, the Lian family wouldn't just stand by and watch. At least, not before they left the abandoned continent. Chu Yufei gritted her teeth as she thought of this. Luo Qingtong's move really slapped countless people's faces. Those who didn't believe that she could do all this and turn the situation around were all slapped in the face. While she was gritting her teeth, Bei Qin, Fengyu, and the others suddenly realized what was going on. They looked at Yi Qianren who was beside them. Master, you already knew about this? Knew that the demonic physician had a way to reverse the situation? Yi Qianxin's deep gaze pierced through the holes in his white jade mask and looked in Luo Qingtong's direction. His gaze was as deep as the sea and as deep as the abyss. I didn't know. His voice was slightly hoarse. He really didn't know that Luo Qingtong would use this method to resolve the crisis. This woman was always able to give him different surprises. Chapter 2639. Chu Xiaofeng and the others were already prepared to fight to the death. But then they heard Lian Xingqian's words. He then saw the Flying Star Lian clan members scatter and surround Chu Yuqing and the others. They immediately knew that they hadn't misheard. Luo Qingtong had really done it. She'd asked the Flying Star Lian family to help them. Not only that, she'd even begged the Flying Star Lian family for help. Chu Jingyi, Chu Xiaofeng, and the other members of the Tianfeng Chu family's 8th elder's line were all stunned. This Luo Xiaoqi. Chu Jingyi sucked in a deep breath. Only then did he come back to his senses. He understood how scheming Luo Qingtong was when she said those words. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Luo Qingtong's words seemed to have been made up at the last moment. But Chu Jingyi was one of the top disciples of the 8th elder's line. It was impossible that he wasn't scheming at all. Just like Chu Yufei, he quickly guessed the meaning behind Luo Qingtong's words. This Luo Xiaoqi was truly incredible. In such a short period of time, she'd actually managed to find a way out of this hopeless situation. And she'd done it so perfectly. Chu Jingyi definitely couldn't have done it himself. It wasn't that he couldn't think of Luo Qingtong's method. Perhaps he could, but it definitely wouldn't be so easy or simple. He needed time, but what they lacked the most right now was time. Chu Yuqing wouldn't give them time to slowly think of a solution. What awaited them was a fate of being strangled to death. While Chu Xiaofeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others were shocked, Chu Lingfeng didn't feel anything at all. In his opinion, Luo Qingtong's actions were completely normal. As long as his master was here, nothing would happen to him. Chu Yuqing and the others wanted to kill them? They were dreaming. He snorted coldly as he looked at Chu Yuqing and the others, his eyes already bloodshot. These people had attacked him again and again. That was one thing, but they actually dared to attack Luo Qingtong. She thought about what Chu Yuqing had just said. He wanted to kill Luo Qingtong. Chu Lingfeng felt a burst of madness in his heart. He glared murderously at Chu Yuqing and the others. Just as he was about to walk out, Luo Qingtong stopped him. No need. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. Naturally, she could tell what Chu Lingfeng wanted to do. This guy wanted to avenge her by killing Chu Yuqing and the others. However, although the Lian family of the Flying Star Planet had helped them, they were not on their side. Lian Xingchen wouldn't allow Chu Lingfeng to make a move against Chu Yuqing and the others. He didn't want to bear the crime of killing the Chu clan's young master, but at the same time he wouldn't help Chu Lingfeng kill Chu Yuqing and the others. That would involve him in the Tianfeng Chu clan's internal strife. Thus, Chu Lingfeng wouldn't gain anything by making a move. Since that was the case, what was the point of making a move? If Chu Lingfeng wanted to deal with Chu Lingfeng and the others, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. There was no need to rush now. Otherwise, why would Luo Qingtong want to use the Lian family of the Flying Star Planet to deal with Chu Yuqing and the others? Wasn't it because she didn't want to completely expose her abilities and strength? The heavenly grass had yet to appear, and she still had a use for Chu Yuqing and the others. Mas? Chu Lingfeng's expression was gloomy. He looked at Luo Qingtong with an unspeakable grievance and hesitation. He couldn't understand why his master didn't want him to make a move against Chu Yuqing and the others. Chapter 2640. His heart was stifled, but he couldn't disobey Luo Qingtong's orders. He immediately retreated, his killing intent filling the air. As for Chu Yuqing and the others, the moment the Flying Star Lian clan members surrounded them, they knew that it was impossible to kill Chu Lingfeng. Not only that, but they also had to endure the other party's terrifying revenge. Thus, the moment Chu Lingfeng stepped forward, they all tensed up and prepared to flee. But before they could do anything, Chu Lingfeng retreated again. His eyes were clearly filled with killing intent and viciousness, but he just looked at them and didn't make a move. It was as if a vicious beast had been put on a special beast-taming rope. It was abnormally tame and docile. Everyone was shocked. This was especially true for Chu Qiankong and the other top disciples. They knew how fierce and unreasonable Chu Lingfeng's temperament was. His personality was like two extremes. When he wasn't provoked, he was both foolish and straightforward. But once he was angered, he would immediately become as ruthless as a peerless vicious beast, vowing to tear the person who angered him to pieces. At that time, no one could control Chu Lingfeng and no one could convince him. The top disciples had suffered many losses at his hands, so they naturally knew Chu Lingfeng's temperament. But they didn't expect him to be able to restrain his anger and not make a move. One had to know that one of them had deliberately provoked Chu Lingfeng and had almost been beaten to death. At that time, the family head and elders had come, but they couldn't do anything about the violent Chu Lingfeng. They didn't expect him to be so obedient to Luo Qingtong. Everyone's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Only now did they realize how much influence Luo Qingtong had in Chu Lingfeng's heart. Damn it, if they'd known this would happen, they wouldn't have agreed with Chu Yuqing's words and attacked Chu Lingfeng. Chu Qiankong and the others were vexed. In fact, they didn't have to kill Chu Lingfeng. If they'd known that Luo Qingtong had such a great influence on Chu Lingfeng, why would they have taken the risk to attack? Wouldn't it have been better to find a way to befriend Luo Qingtong and control her, than use her to control Chu Lingfeng? They wouldn't have fallen to the point where they had to make an enemy of Chu Lingfeng. Fortunately, they hadn't taken the final step, and Luo Qingtong didn't seem to want to pursue the matter from just now. Could it be that she didn't want to make an enemy of the Tianfeng Chu clan? When everyone thought of this, they felt that this was probably the most likely possibility. After all, most of the members of the Chu clan who were present were with them. Chu Lingfeng wasn't afraid of them, and could even take revenge on them. But Luo Qingtong was just a small mercenary. They couldn't just ignore her, right? After all, although Chu Lingfeng was the young master of the Chu clan, it wasn't good to be infatuated with a man. And the elders of the Tianfeng Chu clan might not allow such a thing to happen. Was Luo Qingtong paving the way for her future? As everyone thought this, they suddenly understood. Chu Qiankong and the others breathed a sigh of relief. They hadn't directly participated in the attack against Luo Qingtong and the others. As long as Luo Qingtong didn't pursue the matter and Chu Lingfeng listened to her, then this matter could be considered over. As they thought this, they immediately stepped forward and sternly shouted at Chu Yuqing and the others, "All of you stop. You're fighting among yourselves in front of so many people, and you even attacked the young master." Chapter 26:41. As they spoke, they moved in the direction of Luo Qingtong's group and surrounded Chu Yuqing's group. *CK Your grandpa Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong. Chu Yuqing had already been enraged by the Lian family's actions. When he saw Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong's first and second elders turn to Luo Qingtong's group and curse him, he was so angry that his brain was about to explode. Weren't these guys just waiting for Chu Lingfeng to die? Now that they saw the Lian family's people make a move, they knew there was no chance of success, so they immediately changed sides. This bunch of bastards. Chu Yuqing cursed inwardly as he vomited blood. Fortunately, he hadn't been the only one to make a move. Chu Hanyu and the others had been involved as well. Otherwise, wouldn't Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong have tied him up and brought him to Luo Xiaoqi to beg for forgiveness? Thinking of this, Chu Yuqing felt even more nauseous. He clenched his teeth and looked at Luo Qingtong. He knew that he couldn't do anything to Luo Qingtong this time, let alone Chu Lingfeng. Fortunately, that bitch Luo Xiaoqi still didn't dare to openly offend the Tianfeng Chu family. For now, he'd just admit defeat. Once it was time to fight for the heavenly grass, he'd think of a way to make a move against them. As Chu Yuqing thought of this, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He forced a smile and looked at Luo Qingtong. He said coldly, "This time, it was indeed us who didn't think things through. Young master's matter will naturally be handled by the family's elders. Since you all think we've overstepped our boundaries, we'll withdraw." After saying this, he immediately ordered his men to put away their weapons and disperse the encirclement. But as soon as he finished speaking, Luo Qingtong's indifferent voice rang out. "Young Master Yuqing, is this the end?" Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She raised an eyebrow at Chu Yuqing. He didn't think she'd let him off so easily, did he? He could avoid the death penalty, but he couldn't escape punishment. Luo Qingtong wasn't prepared to let Chu Lingfeng lay his hands on Chu Yuqing and the others, but who said she was going to let Chu Yuqing off so easily? Especially when the other party looked as if he didn't dare to do anything to him. He didn't know where his confidence came from. "What else do you want?" "Humph." Chu Yuqing sneered. He was certain that Luo Qingtong was bluffing. If she dared to do anything to them, she wouldn't have stopped Chu Lingfeng from taking action just now. He still wanted to scare him now. Did he really think that he was a 3-year-old child who could be easily fooled? Reality proved that Chu Yuqing was wrong. "In that case, young Master Yuqing isn't going to apologize for slandering me? This is going to be difficult." Luo Qingtong raised an eyebrow. She looked at Chu Yuqing. "Although I'm not the type to hold grudges, I'm a rather open-minded person. But I'm a man. I can't take it when others call me a calamity." She hadn't even been called that when she was by Yi Qianxian's side, but when she was by Chu Lingfeng's side, she was called a calamity. Even if the uncle could endure it, even if the aunt could endure it, this big sister couldn't. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly at Chu Yuqing. "Young Master Yuqing, do you want me to have the young master personally demand justice from you, or do you want to do it yourself?" As soon as Luo Qingtong spoke, Chu Yuqing's expression froze. "You dare!" he shouted, trying to put on a brave front. She wanted Chu Lingfeng to demand justice. She clearly wanted his life. Chu Yuqing suddenly realized that Luo Qingtong didn't have to deal with Chu Qiankong and the others. She didn't have to deal with Chu Hanyu and the others. Chapter 26:42. Damn it, this slut. She must have deliberately prevented Chu Lingfeng from making a move just now. In this way his side strength was divided. As long as she showed that she only wanted to deal with him, the others wouldn't care at all. Sure enough, when he looked at Chu Hanyu and the others, he saw that their faces were full of indifference. Chu Hanyu and the others were vexed. If they had known that they wouldn't be able to hurt Chu Lingfeng this time, they wouldn't have joined forces with Chu Yucheng and the others. Now they were riding a tiger and couldn't get off. At this moment, seeing that Luo Qingtong was only going to deal with Chu Yucheng, why would they bother with him? They wished that Luo Qingtong would only deal with Chu Yucheng so that this matter could be wiped clean. After all, they hadn't officially made a move against Chu Lingfeng. When they returned to their families in the future, it would be easier to explain. But Chu Lingfeng's side would definitely have a grudge against them. With this thought in mind, how could they have the time to care about Chu Yucheng? When the latter saw this scene, he suddenly felt a burst of fear and trepidation. Luo Shaoqi, this slut, really wanted to use this opportunity to kill him. Just like how he had wanted to use her name to kill Chu Lingfeng. When Chu Yucheng thought of this, the muscles on his face suddenly twitched fiercely. Seeing that Luo Qingtong was about to call Chu Lingfeng to make a move, he immediately shouted, "Wait!" Speaking up to this point, he said with great humiliation, "I apologize." Chu Yucheng almost bit his cheeks as he said this sentence. To have him bow his head to a mercenary, and a man that Chu Lingfeng had taken a fancy to, was extremely humiliating for Chu Yucheng. "Slut, sooner or later I'll make you die without a burial place." Chu Yucheng thought viciously in his heart, but on the surface, he gritted his teeth and said word by word, "I apologize." "Oh, then how does young Master Yucheng intend to apologize?" Luo Qingtong calmly looked at Chu Yucheng as she spoke. She knew what he was thinking when she saw his tough exterior but cowardly heart. However, Luo Qingtong was happy to let him misunderstand, which saved her a lot of tricks. As she spoke, Chu Yucheng's eyes widened. "What do you mean by, apologize?" He barked harshly. He had already apologized to her. This be asterisk teach, what else did he want? Chu Yucheng's face was filled with rage. Luo Qingtong looked at him leisurely and said, "Young Master Yucheng, this is strange. You want to kill me because I'm a troublemaker. You don't think that this matter will be settled with just a few words of apology, right? If that's the case, that's fine too. I'll get young Lord Chu to teach you a lesson. I'll apologize to you after this. How about it?" Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a faint smile. Chu Yucheng, on the other hand, was already on the verge of roaring out, "Not much." The veins on his forehead twitched fiercely. How could he not know that Luo Qingtong's words were a threat? If he really let that idiot Chu Lingfeng take action, then the other party can only wait to apologize to a corpse. This slut. Chu Yucheng's heart was filled with hatred. But no matter how much he hated her, there was nothing he could do. In this situation, no one in the Chu family was on his side, and Luo Qingtong had a good reason to deal with him. He simply couldn't refuse. At this time, Chu Yucheng finally understood how Luo Qingtong felt when she was threatened with the label of a troublemaker. Luo Shaoqi, this slut, she did it on purpose. Chapter 2643. I'll slap myself 10 times as an apology. Chu Yucheng clenched his teeth so hard they were about to bleed. But just as he spoke, Luo Qingtong's voice rang out. "Not enough. Luo Shaoqi." Chu Yucheng roared. "Don't go too far. With your cheap life, if it weren't for that idiot Chu Lingfeng, who do you think you are? It's already good enough that I'm willing to apologize to you. You actually dare to be so picky." When she heard Chu Yucheng's words, a bloody light flashed across Luo Qingtong's eyes, carrying a cold and bloodthirsty aura. Suppressing the blood in her eyes, Luo Qingtong looked at the roaring and furious Chu Yucheng in front of her. Her lips curled into a devilishly charming smile. The birthmark on her face was sinister and ugly, but as her smile blossomed, a kind of seductive charm that even dirt couldn't conceal seeped out. But very quickly, this feeling disappeared without a trace, as if it was just a hallucination. "Young Master Yucheng, you're right." Luo Qingtong smiled as she looked at Chu Yucheng. She raised a hand to stop Chu Lingfeng, whose eyes were red with anger and was about to rush out. She nodded at Chu Yucheng and said, "I'm nothing, but you, young Master Yucheng, are something. But no matter how much you're something, shouldn't you apologize to me now?" Luo Qingtong spoke slowly. Since Chu Yucheng didn't want face, then she wouldn't give him any. "I'll say it right here today. Young Master Yucheng, you can either apologize until I'm satisfied. Otherwise, I'll have young Master Chu teach you what it means to apologize. You should know that I'm looking forward to it. After all, my cheap life is nothing, don't you think? But young Master Yucheng, your life is precious. No matter how you look at it, I don't lose out. Moreover, with young Master Chu around, I might not be in danger." At this point, Luo Qingtong smiled at Chu Yucheng, her lips parting slightly. Chu Yucheng could clearly see that it was the word, "thank you." This be asterisk she's deliberately provoking me? That's right, she didn't want him to apologize at all. She just wanted to provoke him so that Chu Lingfeng would attack him. Damn it, how could he forget about this? As Chu Yuqing thought this, his heart trembled. He was so angry just now that he had forgotten about this. This bastard Luo Shaoqi is really cunning. Chu Yuqing gritted his teeth. He had almost fallen for Luo Qingtong's trap. Was this B*TCH waiting for him to not apologize in anger? He would not let her have her way. 20. He shouted sternly, 20 slaps. 100. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She looked at Chu Lingfeng coldly and said, I also want to clarify that you have wronged me. Chu Yuqing was furious, but when he thought about how Luo Qingtong was deliberately provoking him, he immediately suppressed his anger. He would endure it for now. In the future he would definitely make her die without a burial place. Chu Yuqing roared in his heart, but on the surface he swallowed his anger and said, 50. I can't go any higher. 200. Luo Qingtong's voice was cold. She held her head high and looked at Chu Yuqing, acting like a petty person who had achieved her goal. Her arrogant appearance was so vivid that it could drive a person to death. Young Master Yuqing, if you continue to blabber, I reckon that you won't be able to stop even if the heart of the continent opens. Are you sure you're sincere? Chapter 2644. Luo Qingtong's words were full of arrogance. She used Chu Lingfeng to threaten Chu Yuqing at every turn, looking as if she couldn't wait to kill him. Chu Yuqing was so angry that he trembled and saw stars. He was now completely certain that Luo Qingtong wanted him dead, so she didn't want him to apologize. She was deliberately making things difficult for him. As he thought about it, he gritted his teeth and agreed to Luo Qingtong's request. All right, 200 then. This slut has nothing to say now, right? Oh, I forgot to tell young Master Yuqing. 200 was the price just now. Now it's 300. Who told young Master Yuqing to answer so slowly? Don't you think so? Luo Qingtong smiled sweetly at Chu Yuqing, almost causing him to vomit blood in anger. The more difficult Luo Qingtong was to make things difficult for him, the more certain Chu Yuqing was that Luo Qingtong wanted him dead. He held his breath and didn't even reply to Luo Qingtong. He only said fiercely, all right. 300 then. Then young Master Yuqing, you may begin. Luo Qingtong smiled. Remember, don't use too little strength. Otherwise, I don't mind having young Master Chu do it for me. As soon as Luo Qingtong said those words, Chu Yuqing's eyes twitched fiercely. Originally, he had already dispersed the power in his palm and was prepared to use his own hand to gently slap Yi Zichen. But as soon as Luo Qingtong said those words, he could only gather all his strength in his palm and ruthlessly slap himself. Chu Yuqing was almost sent flying by his own slap, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this scene, the surrounding people were all dumbstruck. Oh my god, Chu Yuqing really did apologize to me? Not only that, he even slapped himself so fiercely. What's going on? Just because Luo Qingtong said she wanted Chu Lingfeng to teach him a lesson? If he was afraid of Chu Lingfeng, he wouldn't have plotted to kill him. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't figure out the crux of the matter. They had originally thought that Chu Yuqing would resolutely refuse to apologize. After all, these top-notch disciples placed great importance on face, and Chu Yuqing hated Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng to the bone. He'd rather be taught a lesson by Chu Lingfeng than admit his own mistakes. But what was going on now? Everyone was dumbfounded. Only a small number of people noticed some clues. Master, the evil doctor is really... Feng Yu's lips twitched. She thought to herself that she and the others should stay away from the evil doctor in the future. This scheme of his was really too frightening. If they offended the demonic doctor would play them to death even without their master's help. Chu Jingyi also looked at Luo Qingtong in shock. Oh my god, she couldn't have already planned to make Chu Yuqing so miserable when she stopped the young master, right? Really? Chu Jingyi clutched his cheek, feeling a burst of pain. It was said that killing someone shouldn't be too excessive. If he were Chu Yuqing, he'd rather be killed than be toyed with like this, right? Chu Yuqing had been completely led into a ditch by Luo Shaoqi. Chu Jingyi believed that if Luo Qingtong had told Chu Yuqing to slap himself 300 times as an apology, and also to state that he had wronged her, Chu Yuqing would never have agreed. But she had gradually led Chu Yuqing into the trap bit by bit. Chu Yuqing hadn't been able to react in time and had fallen into her trap. When Chu Yuqing came back to his senses, he'd probably hate her to the bone. That's not right. He already hates her to the bone. Chapter 2645. While the Tianfeng Chu clan was still in shock, Lian Xingchen was also looking at Luo Qingtong in astonishment. He could clearly see that from beginning to end, the rhythm of the entire scene was in the hands of this seemingly thin and frail youth. The other party's methods were truly impressive. If the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan was half as scheming as her, or rather, if she was willing to help the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan, the position of the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan wouldn't belong to anyone else. Thinking about it this way, the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan had profited from a disaster. She had encountered an ambush but had met such a monstrous youth. It was a pity that the Tianfeng Chu clan had met her first. Otherwise he might have tried to recruit her to the Lian clan. After all, with her scheming and methods, who knew how stunning she would be when her strength grew in the future? Lian Xingchen couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Somewhere not far away, Zhan Beiyue and the others narrowed their eyes as they looked in the direction of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Feixing Lian clan. Young master, this youth called Luo Shaoqi is truly impressive. A member of the Zhan clan standing beside him said. They were far away so they didn't know what was going on over there. But looking at the series of actions of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Feixing Lian clan, as well as Chu Yuqing slapping himself in the mouth, they could still make some guesses. The Zhan clan originally had a deep impression of Luo Qingtong. Previously, when Chu Yuqing had tried to kill Chu Lingfeng, they had seen how easily Luo Qingtong had rescued Chu Lingfeng. Now that they saw her reverse the situation, they were even more surprised. This young man was far more powerful than they had imagined. It's a pity that we have matters to attend to. The middle-aged man sighed again. Luo Qingtong, this kind of intelligent and resourceful youth, was really a good target to recruit, but it was a pity that this was not the right occasion. Zhan Beiyue's face was indifferent and he didn't say anything. Looking at Luo Qingtong's eyes, there was a faint trace of appreciation. The youth's calmness and intelligence in the face of the murderous intent was indeed very rare. Even though he was in a disadvantageous position, he did not panic in the face of danger. His strength was low, but he was neither servile nor overbearing. On the contrary, he had the strength to counterattack. His every word and action seemed very arrogant and despotic, but in fact he had always stepped on the other party's bottom line. If Zhan Beiyue was in her position, he probably wouldn't be able to do better than her. It was a pity that they had to conceal their identities in order to obtain the ancient divine item. They would try to recruit this young man when they met him in the future. Keep an eye on the heart of the continent for now. Also, don't alert the people of the Lian family and the Chu family. Pay attention to the people from the demonic moon sect. See if they will make any moves. As soon as Zhan Beiyue's words left his mouth, the faces of the Zhan clan members turned solemn. They hurriedly replied, yes. The whereabouts of the ancient divine item were right in front of them. They had to be extremely careful. The people from the demonic moon sect had eavesdropped on their conversation and already knew about the existence of the ancient divine item. This time, even if they were seriously injured, they wouldn't give up on obtaining information about the ancient divine item. If the other party really saw an opening and obtained the ancient divine item, it would be troublesome. Everyone's faces were grave. In the direction of Luo Qingtong and the others. Slap, 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 slap. Chapter 2646. Boom. A terrifying wave of spiritual energy came from right in front of Luo Qingtong and the rest. It was the hole in the ground where the heart of the continent was located. The last bit of power of the great Tao around the heart of the continent had completely erupted. The spiritual energy in the surroundings was as pure as water, and it was full of vitality. It dissipated in an instant. Countless streams of decaying spiritual energy surged in from all directions and rapidly eroded this fertile land. The amount of power of the great Tao that erupted from the heart of the continent was too little for the entire abandoned continent. It couldn't be compared to the decaying spiritual energy in the abandoned continent at all. Now that the last bit of spiritual energy in the heart of the continent had erupted, without the support of the spiritual energy, the decaying spiritual energy immediately began to invade again. The location of the hole in the heart of the continent was completely clear in front of Luo Qingtong and the rest. Without the continuous eruption of power of the great Tao, they could enter this place. Let's go. Lian Xingchen and the rest's eyes lit up when they saw this scene. With a swoosh, they dashed toward the huge hole in the ground. When Luo Qingtong and the rest saw this, they couldn't be bothered with Chu Yuqing, who was slapping himself in the face. With a swoosh, they also dashed toward the huge hole. Boom. Yi Qianxian appeared in front of Luo Qingtong in an instant. Without waiting for Chu Lingfeng to react, he pulled Luo Qingtong into his arms and dashed toward the hole. Bastard! Chu Lingfeng was enraged. He had always harbored great enmity toward Yi Qianxian. This man obviously had ill intentions toward his master. His master belonged to Ming Zun. He chased after Yi Qianxian and the rest. However, with the strength of Yi Qianxian and the others, how could they easily catch up to them? The group maintained a certain distance from Lian Xingqian's group and entered the cave almost at the same time as Lian Xingqian. Only now did everyone realize that the strength of this group of white jade masked men was not inferior to the bodyguards of the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan. Since when did Heaven's Wind Mercenary City have such a person? Everyone looked at Yi Qianxian and the others in surprise. The latter and the others looked calm and composed. With the white jade masks covering their faces, no one could see their expressions. They only felt that the origins of this group of people were not simple. He was most likely not a member of the Tianfeng Mercenary City. Instead, he was hiding among the mercenaries and had coincidentally encountered the Tianfeng Chu clan issuing a mission, so he came to join in the fun. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian's team was not the only one. Some of the mercenaries from the Flying Star Lian clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan also quietly displayed strength that was different from the rest. When Luo Qingtong and the others were being attacked by Chu Yuqing and the others, there were still some mercenaries who did not side with her. Instead, they chose to watch from where they were. At this moment, within this group of people, there were people whose strength was on par with the guards of the Chu clan of Heavenly Wind. The Flying Star Lian clan's situation was similar. A group of mercenaries who had kept a low profile suddenly stood out from the crowd. Chapter 2647. Even though they knew that the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lian family of Flying Star would never let anyone take away the Tianluo grass, they were still willing to take the risk and try. What if they succeeded? Even if they couldn't, they could still try. If they couldn't, they wouldn't lose anything, right? Luo Qingtong looked in shock at Yi Qianmin, who snatched her into his arms. Brother? Call me husband. Yi Qianxian's face was indifferent, and his eyes hidden behind the white jade mask were deep. Didn't you say you were praising me? You didn't call me that before. Nonsense. Why did you call me that? The word, husband, wasn't really a compliment. Luo Qingtong's face was full of pain, and she could not say anything for a long time. She was afraid that she would mislead Yi Qianren and let him call every person he liked hubby. She would definitely go crazy at that time. Therefore, she deliberately avoided calling Yi Qianxian husband in front of him. What's more, she was still a teenager. She still had some doubts about calling Yi Qianxian husband. After all, even if she knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Xiaoqi, she still didn't want to call Yi Qianxian husband as Luo Xiaoqi. She always felt that if she called Yi Qianxian that way when he didn't know anything, he would be taken advantage of. In a way, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were just as possessive. Even if it was her alias, she didn't have the right to take away her man. Luo Qingtong was so unreasonable. Therefore, she coughed softly and immediately changed the topic. Well, young Master Chu, before she finished her words, Yi Qianxian's cold voice sounded. Don't worry about him. He is too troublesome to protect you. You'd better stay by my side obediently. Since I've accepted the protection fees, I'll naturally do my best. When he said that, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. So this is the reason why you snatched me away so openly? What a pain in the ass. Thinking about how Chu Lingfeng did not know Yi Qianren's identity at all and was still on guard against her, fearing that she would fall in love with someone else, Luo Qingtong felt her balls ache. Fortunately, Chu Lingfeng might not have the time to find trouble with Yi Qianxian later. Being by Yi Qianxian's side was indeed safer than being by Chu Lingfeng's side. Most importantly, if she didn't reveal her abilities, it would be easy for people to see her as Chu Lingfeng's weakness if she was by his side. If she was targeted, it would be disadvantageous to Chu Lingfeng. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong didn't refute it. In fact, if it weren't for that blockhead Chu Lingfeng's misunderstanding, she would have been by Yi Qianxian's side right now. Therefore, she didn't say anything else. The group of people flew and rushed into the hole at an extremely fast speed. It was filled with rich vitality and spiritual energy, which was completely different from the corrosive spiritual energy outside. For the time being, the corrosive spiritual energy wouldn't be able to corrode this place. The rich spiritual energy meant that the people here could use the energy in their bodies to attack without restraint. They didn't have to worry that they wouldn't be able to replenish their energy in time after using it up. Boom. The moment they entered the cave, an attack erupted from the team. The Flying Star Lien family took the lead in attacking Luo Qingtong and the others. Chapter 2648. The Flying Star Lien family was also competitive, but unlike the Tianfeng Chu family, Lien Xingqian's position in the Flying Star Lien family had been consolidated. The top disciples of the Flying Star Lien family were convinced of his ability and strength and were willing to work for him. As long as the Flying Star Lien family got their hands on the Tianluo grass, it didn't matter who got it. However, the Tianfeng Chu family couldn't. They couldn't let the Tianfeng Chu family get their hands on the Tianluo grass. Therefore, the people of the Lien family of the Flying Star launched attacks on Luo Qingtong and the others after they entered the hole. Boom. The Tianfeng Chu family members were shocked and enraged by the attacks. B*****. Chu Qiankong and the others were almost at the same level as Yi Qianxian. They had to dodge when they saw the attacks coming at them. Yi Qianxian's eyes flickered as he raised his hand and blocked the attacks. However, he, Beiqing Fengyu and the others did not show their true strength. When they blocked the attacks, they pretended to be shocked and took 2 steps back. Boom. With the help of the strike, the members of the Lien family of the Flying Star sector had already rushed into the depths of the cave ahead of them. Chu Qiankong and the others were furious when they saw this. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and looked at Yi Qianxian. With the strength of this man and Beiqing Fengyu, how could they be pushed back by the Lien family of the Flying Star realm? What a joke. Luo Qingtong had seen Yi Qianxian shatter the attacks with ease. It was as if he had crushed a few pieces of tofu. Luo Qingtong had been worried that his blocking would worsen the damage to his meridians. When she saw this, the corners of her mouth twitched and she put away her worries. If he could hurt Yi Qianxian by chopping a few pieces of tofu, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Just how strong was this man after he unleashed his full power? Luo Qingtong was inexplicably in a trance. When she was at the True Spill continent, she had never seen Yi Qianxian use his full strength. At that time, she knew that Yi Qianxian's strength was far from the upper limit of True Spill continent strength. The only time this man was weak was probably before she met him, when his meridians were weak and torn. However, after being healed by the energy in her body, the strength of his meridians increased. From then on, she could no longer feel the upper limit of his strength. Now that he was in the outer realms, it was still the same. This man was really too strong. Indeed, all the hot-blooded genes in her that refused to admit defeat had been aroused. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a domineering and devilish smile. Her head was lowered, so Yi Qianxian couldn't see the curve of her lips, but he could feel her puzzled gaze. He knew that she was wondering why he didn't continue to attack even though he could clearly block the attack. There's no need. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent. Luo Qingtong soon understood the meaning of Yi Qianxian's words. When Yi Qianxian's voice sounded, sharp screams and roars suddenly erupted from the depths of the hole in front of them. Then there was the sound of flesh being torn apart. In this sealed underground hole, it was exceptionally loud and mournful. It's the people from the Flying Star Lien family who entered before. Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed and she looked into the depths of the hole in front of her. Chu Qiankong and the others who were originally furious and wanted to chase after them, were also stunned. Chapter 2649. A group of people suddenly appeared in the depths of the cave. They were the people from the Flying Star Lien family who'd charged in earlier. Fall back. Lien Xingqian and the others were covered in blood. The top disciples of the Flying Star Lien family were at the back of the group, swords in hand. Beside them were the guards of the top disciples. At this moment their numbers seemed to have decreased by a lot. Nearly a third of their people had disappeared. Not only that, but the mercenaries around the ordinary disciples of the Flying Star Lien family had also decreased in number. They were either injured or crippled. Under the protection of Lien Xingqian and the others, they were charging toward the entrance of the cave where Luo Qingtong and the others were. Behind Lien Xingqian and the others, roar. Violent roars rang out one after another. The next second there was a loud boom. Transparent figures, which seemed to have become one with the dense spiritual energy around them, leaped around the cave and chased after the Flying Star Lien family. Bang! A transparent figure jumped onto a rock wall. Then, with a boom, its 4 limbs and claws sank deep into the rock wall. The solid rock walls and boulders in the underground cave were all smashed into smithereens. It had to be known that the rock walls of the underground cave where the heart of the continent was located could even withstand the scouring of the aura of the great Tao that had erupted. Its hardness was far beyond that of ordinary rock formations. However, at this moment, under the scratches of these transparent figures, They were shattered into fragments of sand and stone. At this moment, Luo Qingtong and the others finally got a good look at the transparent figures. These transparent silhouettes were actually monsters of unknown origin. They were all grotesque in appearance. Some were covered in scales and had feathers on their heads. Some were crawling on the ground with limbs as thick as pillars. They looked like beast legs but were actually bird claws. These transparent figures were all grotesque in appearance. When they let out sharp roars, the invisible spiritual energy around them surged violently. The Great Tao has turned into a spirit? These are all creatures formed by the Great Tao's power? When the Heavenly Wind Chu clan members saw this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The Great Tao transforming into a spirit, what kind of concept was that? Legend has it that the 3,000 Great Taos all have their own spirits. Primordial chaos split open the heavens, evolving all things and then evolving the laws. When the primordial chaos opened the heavens, it gave birth to the spirit of the Grand Tao. These living beings were the embodiments of the Great Tao laws. They were innate divine beings. They could freely manipulate any type of law and transform into a myriad of forms. Any cultivation method would be useless against them. Only an Almighty who had completely mastered a certain law of heaven and earth would be able to use the power of the great path that he had mastered to deal with them. However, the spiritualization of the Great Tao only existed in legends. Moreover, there was a fixed number of Great Tao spirits. Only under extremely harsh circumstances would a Great Tao spirit be born. Why did so many Great Tao spirits suddenly appear here? Could it be that the power of laws from the heart of the continent had already surpassed the power of laws of the world? Had it reached the level where it could recreate primordial chaos and split the world apart? This was utter nonsense. As everyone thought this, they quickly recovered from their shock and astonishment. It's not the Great Tao spirit transformation. A disciple of the Tianfeng Chu clan said. Chapter 2650. If the power of the Great Path here has reached the level where it can transform into a spirit, we'll be crushed to death by the pressure of the spiritual qi before we even enter the hole. He said with certainty, it's impossible for there to be a single living thing on this abandoned continent. And it won't become an abandoned continent. One could imagine how rich the power of the Great Path here was to be able to evolve into a Great Path creature. Hongming had opened the heavens. That was the power of creation. Wasn't it normal for it to bring a small abandoned continent back to life? Moreover, the strength of these Great Path spirits was a little too weak. When the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan heard him say this, they immediately raised their heads to look at the transformed Great Path spirits. They discovered that their auras were indeed only at the level of the human martial realm. Although they looked very powerful, due to the limitations of their strength, it was impossible for them to be so powerful that they could defy the natural order. And the strength of the Great Path spirits was definitely not this weak. So these aren't Great Path spirits? A disciple from the Tianfeng Chu clan asked hesitantly. But these transparent figures were clearly the characteristics of Great Path spirits. It was impossible for the crowd to be mistaken. I don't know either. The disciple from the Tianfeng Chu clan said with a frown. What I can be sure of is that these things are definitely not real Great Path spirits, but they do seem to be transformed by the power of the Great Path here. This was a little inconceivable. They weren't Great Path spirits, but they were transformed by the power of the Great Path. And the power of the Great Path here clearly hadn't reached the level where it could manifest into a spirit. Everyone was conflicted. At this moment, these pseudo-Great Tao spirits instantly screamed and pounced at the crowd. Some of them pounced on Luo Qingtong and the others. Others pounced on the people from the Flying Star Lien clan. Seeing this scene, the faces of the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan froze. Quick! Don't think so much. Deal with them first. Although they didn't know what was going on with these fake Great Path spirits, the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan didn't have time to think too much when they saw them pounce on them. These fake Great Path spirits were clearly trying to drive them out of this hole. However, the heart of the continent only opened once a year. There was only one chance to enter at a time. Once they left this place, they could forget about entering it again. And if they waited another year, who knew what would happen to the Tianluo grass? What if it withered after reaching maturity? Wouldn't they miss this opportunity? With such thoughts in mind, how could they have the time to think about anything else? Immediately, they drew out their weapons and prepared to deal with the attacks of these fake Great Tao spirits. At this time, Chu Lingfeng had already rushed in front of Yi Qianxian. He angrily wanted Yi Qianxian to return Luo Qingtong to him, but the youth silently glared at him. No. Luo Qingtong's lips parted slightly as she silently mouthed something to Chu Lingfeng. Given the urgency of the situation, it was best for her to stay by Yi Qianxian's side. For the time being, she did not intend to reveal her identity and abilities. Therefore, she did not want to be a burden to Chu Lingfeng. Mas. Chu Lingfeng fiercely stomped his feet, almost exposing Luo Qingtong's identity. He looked at Luo Qingtong with a pair of aggrieved and red eyes, looking like a big fierce dog that was afraid of angering its master. Luo Qingtong was both angry and amused when she saw his pitiful appearance. This silly big guy was really something. Chapter 2651. Your clothes are a bit messy. As he spoke, he quietly grabbed Luo Qingtong's collar and lifted it up, as if he was helping her fix her clothes. Luo Qingtong froze for a moment. Oh. She responded in a low voice and nodded at Yi Qianxian. Thank you, brother. You're welcome. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes slightly. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. Then he glanced at Chu Lingfeng. The latter's eyes were scarlet red, and he looked at him with a ferocious gaze like a ferocious beast. If not for the fact that Luo Qingtong was in his arms, Chu Lingfeng would have already pounced on him. The latter saw a red mark on Luo Qingtong's neck near her collarbone. He didn't know when that red mark was left there. The color was a little light, but he could vaguely see that it was a hickey. There was a hickey on Master's body. Thinking of how Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were inseparable, and how tolerant Luo Qingtong was towards Yi Qianxian, even letting him hug her waist, Chu Lingfeng's eyes seemed to spit fire as he glared at Yi Qianxian. This man actually dared to plot against Master. Sob sob sob. Mingzun, I couldn't protect Master. I'm sorry. Chu Lingfeng was anxious and angry, but Yi Qianxian's gaze was indifferent. The other party always wanted to snatch Luo Qingtong away from him. Previously they hadn't entered the heart of the continent, so he could temporarily let go. But now they had already entered the heart of the continent. The situation here was unknown, and something similar to the great Tao spirit had appeared. Yi Qianxian couldn't let Luo Qingtong leave his side. He didn't feel at ease leaving Luo Qingtong anywhere other than by his side. His woman should naturally be protected by him. However, in the end, Chu Lingfeng was protecting him and was loyal to Luo Qingtong. Yi Qianxian naturally wouldn't have a conflict with him. He used this method to make him back off. Presumably, when he saw this hickey, he would know that Luo Qingtong's attitude towards him was not ordinary. He would not think of taking this woman back by force. In fact, Chu Lingfeng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He looked at Luo Qingtong with an unspeakable grievance in his eyes. His master still said that she didn't fall in love with someone else. There were even hickeys on her body. God knows that Luo Qingtong didn't even know about this. For the past few nights, she thought that she was sleepwalking and plotting against Yi Qianxian. How could she know that Yi Qianxian had already seen through her identity? This hickey was left behind at that time. Because he didn't want Luo Qingtong to know that he had seen through her identity, Yi Qianxian deliberately left this hickey on Luo Qingtong's body in a very hidden place. Unless Luo Qingtong took off her clothes and looked at herself in the mirror, it was impossible to find out. But in this abandoned continent, where would there be a mirror to look at? Even if there was, Luo Qingtong didn't have the leisure to look at it. Therefore she never found out. At this time Yi Qianxian deliberately left it out for Chu Lingfeng to see. She didn't know it all. When she saw Chu Lingfeng's expression change to one of grief, indignation, and grievance, she felt a wave of depression in her heart. What was going on? Why did this silly big guy's appearance become so strange? However, before Luo Qingtong could think about it, those pseudo-great Tao spirits had already rushed in front of them. Boom. Chapter 2652. The latter's shrill cry was so loud that it hurt everyone's eardrums. Not only that, but the transparent figures that were facing the attacks of the Tianfeng Chu family were instantly washed away like water and light. Then, with a bang, their auras scattered into the surrounding vitality and spirit qi, avoiding the attacks of the Tianfeng Chu family. Before anyone could react, their figures condensed again in mid-air, and then pounced on the people of the Tianfeng Chu family. Ah! A sharp scream sounded, and a guard of a top disciple was pounced on by a transparent figure. In an instant, his body was torn to pieces by the transparent figure in front of everyone's eyes. Rip! The guard's blood splattered and turned into minced meat that filled the sky. In contrast, the transparent monster was abnormally fierce. Roar! It roared in a low voice and pounced on the others again. The other people of the Tianfeng Chu family also encountered the same attack. Everyone's faces were filled with panic. They never thought that these fake Great Path spirits would have such an attack method. This is the characteristic of the Great Path spirits. The disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family from before shouted loudly. These things are indeed formed by the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent. Although I don't know why they can manifest as spirits, they are indeed Great Path spirits. You must be careful. The Great Path spirits were born from the spirit chi. Naturally, they could transform into thousands of illusions at any time and anywhere and integrate into the spirit chi. Moreover, they could control their own laws and attack everyone. These transparent figures were indeed formed by the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent. However, they were not as powerful as the real Great Path spirits. It must be because the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent had not reached the level of being able to manifest as spirits, but it had given birth to Great Path spirits. Everyone was shocked, but they had no time to think too much at this time. Those Great Path spirits were coming menacingly. Because they did not expect their methods before, in an instant, many people died tragically like the previous guard. The people of the Tianfeng Chu family were in a mess. As for the Tao spirits, they either dissipated or reformed. They dissipated like mist inside the hole, but they were everywhere. Their strength was formidable and their attacks were ferocious. Almost every time they attacked, they could take away the lives of a large number of Tianfeng Chu family members. Only now did the members of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan realize why the members of the Flying Star Lien clan looked so pitiful. It was obvious that the Lien family of the Flying Star sector was much more united and capable than theirs. The strength of these Great Path spirits wasn't particularly strong. Logically speaking, they were only in the human martial arts realm. Even though their claws could break gold and stones, they should not have been able to push the Lien family of the Flying Star to such a level. In just a few breaths, he was driven out from the depths of the hole in front. It turned out that the attacks of these Great Path spirits were too strange. It was almost impossible to hurt or touch. These Great Path spirits could only attack when they were in their true forms. And when they transformed into spirit chi, there was no trace of them at all. However, it just so happened that they transformed into spiritual energy, gathering and dispersing extremely quickly. Chapter 2653. If the Flying Star Lien family hadn't attracted some of the Great Path spirits for them, they would have been in the same predicament as the Flying Star Lien family. However, the Flying Star Lien family had suffered so much that they couldn't hold on any longer. Once they couldn't hold on any longer, the Tianfeng Chu family would be the next unlucky ones. Not only did the Tianfeng Chu family know about this, but the Flying Star Lien family also knew about it. They were lucky to have the upper hand before, but who would have thought that there was such a thing in the depths of the cave? They had been attacked by the Great Path spirits, and the advantage they had against the Tianfeng Chu family was gone. At this moment, only by cooperating with the Tianfeng Chu family could they get through this crisis and continue to advance into the depths of the cave. Thinking about this, Lien Xingqian forced a Great Path spirit in front of him away with his sword and scattered the spirit chi that it had transformed into. Then he looked at Luo Qingtong and said, "Let's cooperate." His voice was sonorous and powerful. He didn't look at Chu Qiankong and the others, nor did he look at Chu Lingfeng. Instead he looked at Luo Qingtong. This was because he could see that in the Tianfeng Chu family's team, only Luo Qingtong could make the decision and make the Tianfeng Chu family obey her without any objections. This young man controlled most of the mercenary teams, and Chu Lingfeng, as the young master of the Chu family, was willing to listen to her. Plus the 8th elder's people. As long as Luo Qingtong agreed to cooperate with him, Chu Qiankong and the others would have to agree even if they didn't want to. Therefore, Lien Xingqian didn't ask anyone but Luo Qingtong. Who would have thought that the person in charge of the Tianfeng Chu family's team was a young mercenary who hadn't even reached the Venerable Realm? Okay. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes slightly. She was naturally able to see the situation in this battle. The people of the Flying Star Lien family could not be defeated. Otherwise, the people on their side would have to face the full attack of the Tao spirit. Luo Qingtong and the others had just entered the hole. They hadn't even seen the heart of the continent and the Tianluo grass yet. How could the Lien family and the Tianfeng Chu family suffer such heavy casualties? He didn't know what else was in the depths of this hole. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she agreed without hesitation. Hearing her words, a trace of anger flashed across the faces of Chu Qiankong, Chu Yuanhong and the others. The Tianfeng Chu family actually needed an outsider to make decisions for them. It was simply hateful. They had lost all face, and Chu Yuqing and the others were even more furious. The latter was almost beaten half to death by him just now. It wasn't until the heart of the continent's last burst of energy that he came back to his senses. He realized that he had fallen into Luo Qingtong's trap. He was a top disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family, yet he had slapped himself in the face and apologized to Luo Qingtong after she threatened him. Not only that, he had even beaten himself to the point of vomiting blood several times. As the saying goes, a scholar can be killed but not humiliated. What had he been thinking? Why had he agreed to Luo Qingtong's conditions? And why had he beaten himself up to avenge Luo Qingtong? Chu Yuqing's eyes rolled back and he almost fainted on the spot. If he hadn't known that the heart of the continent was completely open and that the Tianluo grass was at hand, he wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Chapter 2654. Luo Shaoqi, what right do you have to make a decision on behalf of the Tianfeng Chu clan? He shouted angrily. You don't have to agree. I'm sure the Lian clan will be happy to do so. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly. When did Chu Yuqing think this was going to happen? He didn't have to agree, but he would have to lead his people to survive on their own. Luo Qingtong was very happy. Presumably the Lian clan was thinking the same thing. After all, if the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces were scattered, it would be a good thing for the Lian clan, who had suffered heavy losses. However, Luo Qingtong wasn't ready to divide the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces for the time being. At this time, more people meant more help. She and Yi Qianming would be able to save a lot of effort. Otherwise, why would she pay attention to Chu Yuqing? She would have kicked him out long ago. Hearing this, Chu Yuqing's face instantly froze. He was just making a fuss. Chu Yuqing wasn't stupid. Lian Xingxian had asked Luo Qingtong, which meant that their opinions weren't important. Hateful Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, listen to that bitch. Otherwise, how could they have ended up in this situation? Chu Yuqing gnashed his teeth inwardly. His face was green, red, and white like a colorful color palette. However, he didn't dare to leave in a huff. Otherwise, if he left the group, he would be tortured to death by the spirits of the Great Tao. It was also impractical to leave this place. Previously, they had refused to leave in every possible way. Now that the cave was surrounded by spirits of the Great Tao, even the way out was blocked. They couldn't leave even if they wanted to. Thinking of this, Chu Yuqing's expression became more and more colorful. Under everyone's gazes, his face turned the color of a pig's liver. Luo Qingtong was too lazy to pay attention to him. Seeing that he was so sullen that he didn't dare to speak, she snorted coldly and said to everyone, "Let's go. We're going to the Lian clan." As soon as she spoke, Yi Qianming brought her forward. Bei Qing, Feng Yu and the others followed closely behind, followed by Chu Lingfeng, Chu Xiaofeng and Gui Feng. As soon as the group of people moved, the others could only follow suit. Although Chu Chenkong and the others were not worried, they knew that joining hands with the Lian family of the Flying Star sector was the best choice right now. Without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. Unless they didn't want the Tianluo grass anymore. Otherwise, they would have to cooperate with the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. They were supposed to agree to this, but Lian Xingxian only asked Luo Qingtong and not them. Did he think that they were inferior to Luo Qingtong? Chu Qiankong and the others felt extremely stifled after being suppressed by a young mercenary who wasn't even a venerate. They weren't much better off than Chu Yuqing. It was just that he didn't fly into a rage like Chu Yuqing. Lian Xingxian and the others were finally able to catch their breath when they met up with the Flying Star Lian family. They had just withstood the endless attacks of the spirits of the Great Tao and were about to collapse. The spirits of the Great Tao also seemed to be very intelligent. When they saw that Luo Qingtong and the others had joined hands with the Lian family of the Flying Star sector, their attacks became even fiercer. If this continued, Luo Qingtong and the others wouldn't be able to hurt the spirits of the Great Tao, while the latter would be able to continuously injure them. Sooner or later they would be exhausted and die here. Is there any way? Yi Qianming's expression was indifferent. Chapter 2655. If someone could perceive the existence of these Great Tao spirits, they would find that the Great Tao spirit dissipated by Yi Qianming seemed to be hidden in the spiritual qi and dissipated into nothingness. But in fact it was completely killed by Yi Qianming. The man's attack directly injured the source. Even if these Great Tao spirits escaped into the spiritual qi after dissipating, they couldn't escape death. It was completely different from others who simply dissipated those Great Tao spirits. He didn't mean anything else by asking Luo Qingtong. He just thought that this woman had many means and extraordinary abilities. Even if her identity was hidden, she might be able to think of a way to deal with these great Tao spirits. Of course, it didn't matter if she couldn't think of a way. At worst, he would just have to put in more effort. Yi Qianxian thought so and suddenly raised his hand to shatter another great Tao spirit. Bei Qing, Fengyu and the others were not as efficient as him. However, when the group worked together, they quickly killed the great path spirits around them one by one. If someone noticed them during the battle, they would find that the number of great Tao spirits on their side was the least. And there were fewer and fewer of them. And because these great Tao spirits were constantly dissipating and manifesting, they were killed by Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others without leaving any traces. No one noticed that something was wrong here. Luo Qingtong heard Yi Qianming's words and nodded subconsciously. Yes, but I don't know if it's effective. Luo Qingtong said and frowned. These great Tao spirits were originally formed by the power of the great Tao in the depths of this hole. In this case, even if Luo Qingtong had a pair of blood eyes, it was impossible to see their hidden traces. Because they themselves were the spiritual qi. Of course, Luo Qingtong could lock onto them when they first appeared. But even if Luo Qingtong pointed out the place where these great Tao spirits appeared, by the time everyone's attack hit, these great Tao spirits might have already dissipated. Unless those people could directly lock onto the place where they would appear with their blood eyes like Luo Qingtong and kill them directly. But that was impossible. And Luo Qingtong couldn't reveal her ability just like that. She narrowed her eyes. After carefully observing these Tao spirits, a vague idea flashed through her mind. However, this idea wasn't mature yet, so she wasn't prepared to say it out loud. She wanted to observe it more carefully. Who would have thought that Yi Qianxian would ask such a question? Yes. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. He nodded and looked at Luo Qingtong. He whispered, "What is it? Tell me." Yes. Thinking of her current identity as Luo Qingtong, who was famous for her meticulous observation, Luo Qingtong was not afraid that Yi Qianxian would find anything wrong with her.